Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and the end is here. The end is here, and we warned about this day. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Now, we got to get into this, y'all. You know, revolution is a way of life, and revolution is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Here goes some revolutionary dinner. Zelensky has shocked the West. The U.S., I think they're upset. I know fake news is upset that Zelensky say Trump offers him the best opportunity to end the war.
Now to the war in Ukraine, and tonight President Zelensky telling reporters he believes the war with Russia will end faster under Trump. At what cost for Ukraine?
Look at his face. You didn't want to say that, did you? Now Zelensky, like the weasel he is, now that Trump is in power, Zelensky saying, oh yes, I'm so grateful because I know now the war will end. Yeah, because Trump is forcing you to take this deal.
Ukraine. What Zelensky also said, our chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell from Kyiv tonight.
Tonight, ferocious fighting underway in Kursk, the border area of Russia. Ukrainian forces took over earlier this year. As President Zelensky predicts, the war will end faster under the policies of President-elect Trump. 50,000 Russians, supported by North Korean soldiers and weaponry, now trying to drive...
No North Koreans. That's a lie. Stop lying. Y'all ain't seen no North Koreans. That's racist. Y'all see some Asians in Russia? Asian people stay in Russia. But, how they're trying to make people think that the only reason Russia is now kicking ass and it's all over is because North Korea giving some help. No. And it's U.S. servicemen been dying. We've been showing that. NATO been dying in Russia. And a bunch of them is surrounded right now in Kursk.
Zelensky's men out of Russia. And the Russians also advancing on the front lines inside Ukraine, in the eastern Donbass and northeastern Kharkiv regions. But in a new interview, Zelensky saying, for us, a just peace is very important, so there'd be no feeling that we lost our best people for the sake of an injustice imposed upon us. The war will end, but there's no exact date. But Trump has vowed to end the war quickly.
We're going to work very hard on Russia and Ukraine. It's got to stop. Russia and Ukraine's got to stop.
But for now, Russian attacks on civilian areas incessant as Ukraine readies to negotiate with Trump.
Lies. No civilian areas, military targets, some shrapnel hit buildings, innocent people die in war. That's we said we don't like that here. But you notice how they never say Israel is hitting any civilian areas. But Russia hitting. How the hell is all those soldiers dying if Russia's targeting? See, this is the BS. People didn't know about how much propaganda they push until they start paying attention. The cult figure, we taught them the hell these people talk about Russia targeting civilians in Ukraine. Are you crazy? Putin been delicate with these goddamn people. He risked more of his troops because he didn't want to kill so many innocent Ukrainians. He could have went in there like NATO. It wouldn't even be no Ukraine right now.
Above all, Ukraine wants security guarantees, but at what cost?
You see what this is what they show on the news. You see, that's why fake news going out of business. The only reason I'm showing them so we have something to laugh at. You say Zelensky ready to surrender. Why are you showing all these people crying in apartment buildings? Putin targeted them. No, that's a lie. Your air defense systems usually hit these apartment buildings. Putin don't. Remember, those are multi-million-dollar missiles. Putin ain't trying to waste no damn missiles on no apartment buildings. A kindergarten was hit. Why the hell you got the air defense missiles near kindergartens? Because your air defense missiles is killing your civilians. You know who Putin is targeting.
David, though it's unclear from Zelensky's interview exactly what the cost is going to be, I think the reality on the ground is that they may have no choice but to hand over parts of their country to Vladimir Putin if they really want peace. David?
First of all, nobody handed over anything. Nobody handed Putin shit. He took that. And y'all did everything y'all could to stop him. You were humiliated. But hold on, y'all, because this not over with. We got CNN. I think CNN, they got something I need to look at too, because I heard they was over there crying. They over there so sad. I couldn't even believe CNN had the nerve to play Zelensky saying Trump gives him the best opportunity to end the war. I like, these people really know the end is near. Y'all actually gonna say that? So let's hear these people. They pissed. Revolution is a way of life. Salute. They know it's over. Trump got other things to do, man. He ain't finna be sitting there getting nuked for these people.
The bad news keeps coming for Ukraine. Russia is not only gaining ground along key front lines, it's also preparing to launch a massive counteroffensive in the southern Russian region of Kursk, the only place where Ukraine has seen major military success.
Ukraine didn't see no major military success in Kursk. That's in Russia. They invaded Russia. You notice you don't call it an invasion of Russia. How the hell did they pop up in Russia? Anyway, they got trapped. Putin trapped them down there. They're trapped. NATO's trapped. U.S. soldiers trapped. The colonels, I heard, is trapped. That's why this is so alarming. That's why they want to deal too. They want to get their damn soldiers back. You see, that's why the German prime minister, whatever they call him, he had to go see Putin today, humble himself, and Putin checked him. Let him know he still smell like a Nazi. I ain't pushing. Now these people on TV said they want Trump to help them. This is crazy. They praying Trump bring them some peace. And guess what? So they can say, hey, it ain't us, Trump. You got to get this deal, or you the problem, or you the reason everybody gonna die.
This year. All of this as Ukraine nears 3 years since Russia's full-scale invasion. And it's now facing, of course, uncertainty with its most important ally, the United States. But during an interview, Zelensky said one thing is certain as President-elect Trump prepares to return to the White House.
I believe that the war will end, and it will not end in the abstract, but there's no exact date. However, the war will end faster with the policy of the team that will now lead the White House. This is their approach, their promise to their society, and it is also very important to them.
And joining us now, CNN national security analyst and former deputy director of national intelligence, Beth Sanner. Beth, nice to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jessica.
I first just want to know what you make of that comment I just played from President Zelensky.
Right. And I think I couldn't really hear at the end, but the last sentence that I read, he said, was that, and it's up to Ukraine to make sure that this war ends in the next year, and with, a politically negotiated ending, something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And so I think that Zelensky...
Ma'am, quit trying to save face. There will be no politically negotiated shit. This is a military defeat, ma'am. Let's start with that. Let's start right there. You're not doing anything but making sure that he put his signature. And he can't negotiate with Putin because he ain't the real president. Putin already said that. Zelensky got to get the hell out the way. That's why they trying to overthrow Zelensky. And they supposed to be running some elections. Because Putin told him a long time ago, this man here is a dictator. He didn't run for president again because he knew he was going to lose. Once that Putin said, he can't. Putin ain't no fool, he's a lawyer. Putin said, that man can't sign no agreement with us. Later on, y'all can say the documents wasn't real because that man wasn't the president. Putin said, I want to see a real president. Surrender to me.
And the Ukrainians in general are just, they're the ultimate in realists. If you are a country that is, weaker, you have to figure out how you are going to make it. And in Ukraine's case,
if they weaker, why the hell did they poke the bear listening to the U.S., knowing the U.S. ain't won a war in so long, since the Civil War?
This is about survival. So I think he understands that Ukraine is, at risk of being a pawn in this. And his statement to me is absolutely about making sure that President Trump knows that he is going to be part of the solution and not the problem, that Ukraine is willing to go to the negotiating table.
Okay, and to that end, Zelensky met with both.
See, she know a lot of CNN. They know a lot of CNN viewers are stupid and don't realize what's been going on. That man didn't want to negotiate. That man said he wouldn't not ever negotiate with the terrorist. Putin and Russia were terrorists. And that man said his peace plan was Russia leave immediately, give us back all our territory. We want that land you sitting on, Putin, because it's 12 trillion you done stole in land, and we need Crimea back. That's what Zelensky peace plan. Putin laughed at him and took more land. Now he's saying he won't let Trump know that he want to be part of the solution. Yeah, because he know Trump not playing. Trump want peace, or else something gonna happen to Zelensky. Zelensky know when Trump told him you sign that peace deal, it was or else. Zelensky know what the oils is, man.
Both Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump when he visited earlier this summer. And there's another clip I want to play from this meeting between Trump and Zelensky. Here's this.
We have a very good relationship. And I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, I see.
Yeah. I think me and you have more good relations. No, you don't got no better relationship with that man than Putin. Zelensky, you just was talking shit about him with Joe Biden, talking about Trump is the problem. Zelensky, do you not remember you the reason Trump got impeached? You got that man impeached. All he asked was for y'all to do was look into the crime of Hunter Biden them at Appeasement. And you folded like a lawn chair and y'all worked against this man. And you set him up. Now you saying, we have a good relationship. Man, please, you sign that peace deal Trump told you to sign, or else the CIA, you going to sleep with the fishes.
Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango.
And I know you were listening, but when you watch that video, kind of the look on Zelensky's face, and he looks at him, he goes, I think we have a good relationship. You say, you know, you're kind of.
Who are you? Trump looking at you like, man, who are you? I just met you. Who are you, comedian? I don't know you like that. See, Trump don't mind telling him to his face on the news, hey, I fuck with you. I fuck with Putin. And Putin my partner. Zelensky didn't like that because no other president in America wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say Putin's an evil dictator and Zelensky, he's a prince of peace. Oh, Trump say, hey, deal or no deal.
Categorization of where Ukraine finds itself right now as they try to prepare to be in as good of a position as possible. What do you think are kind of the best and worst case scenarios for them if Trump does indeed go forward with trying to negotiate a deal with Putin to end this war?
Well, I think that, you know, in some ways, a lot of people
That's
around.
why America is a joke. Nobody can ever take them serious. I thought Putin was Hitler. I thought Putin was the next Hitler. How can you make a deal with Hitler? See, their words mean nothing. Like they said Trump was Hitler. How can Hitler make a deal with Hitler? It's two Hitlers? Hitler's Russia, the Russian Hitler and the American Hitler. Some people need to call these people out on this bullshit, bro. What is Hitler doing negotiating with himself? They just call everybody Hitler they don't like. Anybody. Now Hitler got to negotiate with Hitler. Man, please. And if Putin was Hitler, why would we be negotiating with him? So you just go all out and attack Hitler with nuclear weapons and pray Hitler don't take over the world? See, they disgusting and don't have to pay. Yeah, they paying now because people is through with their bullshit, but they still willing to come on here and fool the people who watching them.
Zelensky, you know, they do not have a great relationship with the U.S. administration right now. It's not all, you know, rainbows and sunshine. And so in some ways, I think that there are certainly parts of Ukrainian society and leadership who welcomes the Trump administration and their kind of realistic approach. And they're hoping that what happens in the end here is that Trump will realize that Russia actually is not willing to compromise and that he is going to have to support them and force Russia to make
now, Russia don't want to compromise. Russia has been compromising with y'all for decades. And this is the problem. Compromise. You can't compromise with criminals and killers. Putin finally understand that. Compromise with y'all? Hell no. Now you're going to have to kneel before him, before the whole world, and admit you were defeated militarily. Political negotiation, my ass. You're getting defeated militarily, man. And Trump just going in here to say, hey, we're not sending nothing else. Zelensky signed that. So it's disgusting. Y'all going in here riding Trump back to pretend like the U.S. still got some respect. Trump trying to go get y'all a little bit of respect back before Putin put an end to that bullshit for good.
Compromises. I think the worst case is probably not the most likely. I do not think that President Trump wants to go down as the greatest appeaser of Russia in history. You know, like looking like a Chamberlain. I don't think he wants to do that. I think he wants to end this war, but and I think that he believes that it is on fair terms. I think that fairness is in the eyes of the beholder, and so that measurement stick is really going to be about how each side sees this, and it's going to be a little harder than it looks at first glance.
I also want to ask you about one of Trump's picks, former Congresswoman Tulsi.
I didn't want my people to hear. They on CNN trying to let people know you're gonna be seeing Zelensky surrendering real soon, and this is because Zelensky is a hero who wants peace, and he's willing to surrender. What a joke! So he can get that peace. But I just want to take a little. What's actually going on over there in Ukraine? Because the news, they don't show much no more, y'all. You know, y'all notice that lately? We don't get any footage. It's 2024. I said this a year ago. You seen more of a war in World War II than you seen about what the fuck was going on in Ukraine. How is that? They censor everything, block everything. Nothing can be shown. You're supporting terrorism. That's crazy. You see more footage from World War II. They don't want nobody to see their defeat. Look at these people in Odessa. They're going to take this city too. They don't surrender right now. Now, this is what a night is like.
Although the clip looks like a video game, Ukrainian air defenses are...
And that's crazy. They're trying to shoot down drones. This is what a life up under U.S. protection is like for Israel and for Ukraine.
Working hard against Russian kamikaze drones. Chernihiv, which came to Odessa region on the night of Friday, November 15, 2024.
Look what they scared to death. They can't stop the rain, man.
The video shared on social media shows
all this shit they shoot got to come down. So what goes up must come down. Then they want to show you when apartment buildings is burning. That's why I keep telling. That's why I showed you earlier. Then they want to show you daycares it's on fire. They want to show you innocent civilians getting hit. They're hitting them. Putin is shooting at them. They shooting into the sky trying to knock shit down. And that's what's so disgusting. We got to learn about war. Sometimes your air defense systems can be your worst enemy because, hey, you're going to kill your own people trying to protect yourself.
Moments how Ukrainian anti-aircraft guns, German Gepard SAM placed to defend the port of Odessa, try to repel Chernihiv drones or so-called Shahed 136, when the swarm of drones again attacks their targets. Ukrainian anti-aircraft fire lights up the sky over the port, a center of logistics and military hardware supplied by Western countries. Another important aspect of the Russian attack was the targeting of hidden logistics bases, which are used to store and distribute weapons and ammunition.
NATO hiding out in this port city, Odessa. NATO hiding out here. Britain was using this port to launch strikes on Russia, pretend like it was Ukraine. And this is another way of Putin letting them know y'all don't sign. And Putin already told him in a speech that Catherine the Great of Russia named this city. That's a warning to them. If you don't give me peace, then we're gonna have to take this back for Catherine the Great. That's real talk. They're gonna lose more.
Although the complex is very effective in combating low-flying targets, its defenses could not withstand a massive attack with the use of perfect Russian attack UAV. Another important result of the attack is the dilapidation of Gepard air defense system, which apparently did not have much success in shooting down the drones, and the explosions caused in the air were very few. Even in the attempt to repel the attack, some of the drones and missiles fell, causing damage to civilian buildings, especially on such streets as Cosmonaut, Gogol, Bastera, Novoselsky, Galago-Galenka. The defense failed completely against the swarm of drones, as shown in many footage, including one taken by Turkish sailors who were at sea in the Black Sea. As a result, most of the drones managed to hit their targets, and footage of the explosions circulated on the internet. Separately, one of the bases located on Odaria Street in Odessa was also hit. This attack destroyed a truck carrying artillery shells, mobile repair station for field repair of armored vehicles, navigation and command system designed to coordinate the movement and attack of military targets. Keep in mind, Chernihiv 2 drone is a real game changer. Pay attention to the large scale of production at its factory in Russia, with a domestic production cost of about $48,000, as well as day and night versions, in black and white. It seems that Chernihiv 2 is not a copy of Shahed 136 but an evolution. But both of them make the enemy terrified.
The Russian army continues its rapid offensive in all directions of the front. Almost every 5 hours, war correspondents report another success of Russian troops on the battlefield. In the past 24 hours alone, war correspondents have reported on Russian troops' numerous successes in the Kurakovo, Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Kharkiv, and Chasiv Yar directions of the front. In addition, fighting between Russian troops and the Ukrainian army units has also intensified in the northern part of the Kharkiv region. So, a few minutes ago, war correspondents stated that Russian soldiers of the group of troops under the designation Sever attacked the Ukrainian army's positions in the village of Chasiv-Yar, in the north of the Kharkiv region. It is reported that as a result of a 2-hour battle, with the use of artillery and multiple rocket launchers, Russian troops managed to dislodge the Ukrainian army units from this village. At the same time, it is worth noting that since May of this year, the settlement has changed hands several times. However, judging by what is happening on the battlefield, Russian troops are serious this time, and will no longer surrender this settlement to the Ukrainian army. The situation of the Ukrainian army also continues to deteriorate rapidly in Toretsk direction of the front. In particular, on November 16, war correspondents confirmed that Russian troops had significantly advanced in the central part of the city of Toretsk. It is reported that at the moment the main battles are taking place on Hrashevsky Street, in the northern part of the city. In the last 24 hours alone, Ukrainian troops have lost several powerful fortified positions in this area. In total, as of November 17, 2024, Russian troops control more than 50% of the territory of the city of Toretsk. Simultaneously with this, Russian troops also made significant progress near the village of Dakhnoy, north of Toretsk. According to war correspondents, over the past 48 hours, Russian troops have managed to take control of about 7 square kilometers of territory near this settlement. It is reported that the pressure from the Russian troops turned out to be so great that the Ukrainian army units were forced to retreat behind the Konstantinivka-Halyuka railway. In Chasiv Yar direction of the front, Ukrainian troops, together with so-called foreign mercenaries and Ukrainian nationalists, also continue to suffer serious defeats. In particular, Ukrainian and Russian war correspondents confirmed that on the morning of November 16, Russian troops managed to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian army in the western part of the Oktyabrski microdistrict and enter the central part of Chasiv Yar. It is reported that during the decisive actions of the Ivanova paratroopers, Russian troops managed to gain a foothold in the street of Nedijevchenko. At the same time, it is worth noting that the defense in this area was held by Ukrainian nationalists from the nationalist elite Azov battalion. War correspondents report that Ukrainian nationalists mostly try to avoid direct clashes with Russian paratroopers, and are in Chasiv Yar mainly to intimidate ordinary Ukrainian soldiers, and prevent them from fleeing from the positions of the Ukrainian army. Meanwhile, the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces Lieutenant General Alexander Pavlyuk, confirmed that on November 15, several groups of Russian Spetsnaz, together with sabotage and reconnaissance groups, invaded the territory of the Chernihiv region. At the same time, the Ukrainian general refused to give any details of what was happening in this direction of the front. Later, the Russian military department published footage of the Russian flag raising in such settlements as Muravy and Gremyak, in the northern part of the Chernihiv region. Let me remind you that it was from these settlements that the Ukrainian troops regularly shelled the civilian population of the Bryansk region. It is reported that during the storming of these settlements, fighters of Russian Spetsnaz also managed to capture about 60 Ukrainian border guards. Moreover, on November 16, at 8 a.m. Moscow time, Ukrainian war correspondents reported that such settlements as Kolos and Novoselovka, in the northern part of the Chernihiv region, also came under the control of Russian troops. Thus, as of November 17, settlements of the Chernihiv region are under the control of Russian forces. Moravy, Gremyak, Novoselovka, and Kolos. At the same time, it is worth noting that Gremyak is a fairly large settlement that has an advantageous geographical location, being located next to the road that leads to the city of Chernihiv itself. It is obvious that the loss of such a strategically important settlement caused quite significant damage to the Ukrainian army. The most interesting thing is that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, and in particular the Russian General Staff, still refuse to comment on the Russian forces' invasion of the Chernihiv region. Against this backdrop, a number of well-known Ukrainian military experts said that the invasion of the Chernihiv region and the capture of 4 settlements by Russian forces is Moscow's brutal revenge for the Ukrainian army's actions in the Kursk region. However, many authoritative Ukrainian telegram channels, citing their own sources in the Ukrainian General Staff, said that everything that is happening in the Chernihiv region is not just Russia's revenge for Kursk. According to them, the Russian army is probing the defense of the Ukrainian troops in the northern part of the country. And the fact that Russian Spetsnaz managed to take control of 4 settlements in the Chernihiv region indicates that the defensive lines of the Ukrainian army in the north of the country are in a deplorable state. Mainly, such a deplorable state of the Ukrainian army's defense in the north of the country is associated with the military adventure of the Kiev authorities in the Kursk region. As it turned out, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, General Sersky, transferred to the Kursk region not only the most combat-ready units from Donbass, but also from the Chernihiv region. Against this backdrop, many Ukrainian telegram channels expressed confidence that Russia is preparing an attack on Kiev from the Chernihiv region. According to them, this attack on Kiev will force the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine to engage even those units of the Ukrainian army that are currently in the Kursk region, to protect the Ukrainian capital. All this can lead to a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense in many sectors of the front, as a result of which the head of the Kiev regime, Vladimir Zelensky, will simply be forced to sign an act of unconditional surrender.
secret that for months now. So it's either the Western leaders going to the Kremlin, imagine that, imagine that picture with all of these weasels sitting at the table in Moscow. That would be the utmost humiliation. It's either that, or they would have to unblock all of those rules that they've put in place and dismantle all of those ICC warrants in order to speak to Vladimir Putin, which would be a humiliation of another magnitude. So there's no easy way out. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today is Saturday, the 16th of November, and this episode will be entirely dedicated to the phone call between Olaf Scholz and Vladimir Putin. Yesterday afternoon, the news broke out that Olaf has finally picked up the phone and has called the Kremlin. I want us to analyze it into the smallest detail possible, understand why this phone call has been made in the first place, what it means to Germany, to Olaf personally, but also to Ukraine and Europe as a whole. Zelensky has had a couple of reactions to this phone call, one of which is exactly what you would expect, a lot of nonsense. However, the second reaction, I think it's almost spot on. He's got it right for the first time in his life. So let's understand, why has this phone call been made? Well, it's no secret that for months now, Olaf Scholz has admitted openly that at some point in time, he's willing to speak to Vladimir Putin. Now, at the time he's made these statements, I think it was August, late August or beginning of September, when he's first admitted to it. At the time, I think he was just concerned about Germany's free fall in economic terms. However, as time went on and it became clear that Donald Trump has a very good chance of becoming the next US president, I think Olaf has actually seen beyond that. And not just Olaf, but also the Europeans. You see, Donald Trump, he's made no secret that he will not support Ukraine into the future. Now, nobody knows for sure what Donald Trump will do, but those are the indications. And what that means is that Europe will be left holding the bag. Europe, the Europeans, they cannot afford to support Ukraine as the United States did. It's just impossible. They don't have the production capability. They don't have the money. They lack the resources. It's impossible. So for them, the Ukraine situation has become the hot potato. Nobody wants it. So one of them had to sacrifice himself, so to speak, and pick up the phone and speak to Vladimir Putin. That person was Scholz. I think people wanted Scholz to make that phone call, but I think Scholz also volunteered. Let's not forget that Scholz is in a very precarious situation in Germany. It looks more likely that Friedrich Merz will be the next German chancellor, which I think would be a disaster, but that's another conversation. Point being, Scholz has been in the...
See, winter time is here. It's coming. Winter is coming. And then people finna freeze to death. I think I've seen one news story I haven't been able to go over. Austria, one of those European nations, Putin just cut the gas off. People will lose their life behind that. But hey, you want to help Ukraine, right? You want to sanction Russia? Putin waiting till the right time to turn off the little bit of gas that was drizzling into Europe. And because of their decisions, you see, this is hardball here. A lot of people going to freeze to death in Europe. Just one.
Prime position to make this phone call. Also, Germany has been the biggest loser out of all of the European countries when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine.
Putin is telling them, y'all will receive no mercy, and I will have no tears for what happened to your citizens because of y'all foolishness until Zelensky surrender.
Their economy has suffered the most out of all of them. So it makes sense. Now, one important thing to understand is that this phone call takes place after the US elections. Nobody picked up the phone before the US elections, which reinforces my belief that this is all to do with what the Europeans fear that the United States policy will be from January onwards. So with that established, this phone call had to be made, but nobody wanted to be that person. Olaf Scholz said fine, because for Olaf, it works well. Actually, because he gets to be seen as the mediator, as the more rational person. And given the fact that he's way behind in the polls compared to Friedrich Merz, Olaf Scholz actually stands to benefit from this. He's not doing it from the goodness of his heart. So with that said, let's see what the phone call has been all about. We have an article here where we have multiple articles, but the first one we're going to cover is about the content of the phone call. And as we go through, my friends, I'm going to give you guys my thoughts. I have some very strong thoughts regarding this. Kremlin reveals what ultimatums Putin gave to Scholz. In particular, Putin told the German chancellor that he had unleashed a full-scale war against Ukraine because of NATO's long-term aggressive policy aimed at creating an anti-Russian bridgehead on Ukrainian territory. Well, multiple news sources, they relate.
Putin saying this is your fault. You see what I'm doing to Ukraine? You could thank yourselves for this. See, checking them off the top. This ain't no Putin was not statesman-like with this phony when he called. Hey, why should I? Y'all try to kill me. Y'all try to kill my people. Y'all try to destroy my nation, cripple the economy, have me overthrown. And you think I'm going to be nice with you? No. And then he know his message going to go out to the world. He won't let the whole world know he talking to this buster rough. The U.S. can't help you. Y'all tried everything y'all can. So you calling me because you know I'm in control of this here.
To the fact that, well, when this phone call started, Olaf Scholz has said to Vladimir Putin that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, we stand by Ukraine, all of that gibberish. I can only imagine what an absolute fool Scholz must have made out of himself. I mean, nobody's speaking to Putin for so long, and the first time someone actually picks up the phone, it just preaches to Vladimir Putin. That's just laughable, but it also describes the state of the European politics. I imagine this is how it went. They started to talk, and then Olaf Scholz went through the script. Vladimir Putin just listened and said, Olaf, are you finished now? Are you finished with the script? Can we just talk like two normal human beings? That's what I would have done if Olaf Scholz would have started the conversation with nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine and all of that BS. But regardless, they've gone through that. And what it is specified is that Germany said that they want, and they also spoke for the rest of the Europeans, Germany said, we want a negotiated settlement. And Vladimir Putin said, well, we also want a negotiated settlement. But I think this is one of the biggest things that media is not really picking up on it. But do you know who did? Volodymyr Zelensky. Volodymyr Zelensky is picking up on something that the Western media is completely leaving out.
Putin told him the negotiated settlement is the reality on the ground. That's the negotiated settlement. I want y'all to open your eyes. And I want you to look at Ukraine. What do you see? Oh, you see us? All that land that we took? That's the negotiation. You ain't getting none of this back. Start with that.
Out either because they don't see it, or they don't understand it, or they just don't want to report on it. When Vladimir Putin says that he also wants to end this war peacefully, as in at the negotiating table, Vladimir Putin doesn't mean that he wants to negotiate per se, and I'm going to explain why. Negotiations means that you're going to compromise on something. You gain something here, but you also have to give something in return. That's what a negotiation is. Russia doesn't need to be in that position. You only negotiate when there's no other way to achieve the outcome that you want. But you see, that's the problem. Russia is actually in a position to meet all of their objectives, militarily and otherwise, in Ukraine. They do not have to resort to negotiations in the traditional sense. So when Vladimir Putin says, we also want this to end at the negotiating table, what he really means is, we want Ukraine to capitulate, and these are our terms. Olaf Scholz is not speaking the same language. Listen to this. He also claimed that he had never refused to negotiate a peaceful settlement, but on Russia's terms, taking into account the new territorial realities. And that's exactly what it is. You see, the victor gets to decide the terms of the peace. And Russia is in that position. The West and Ukraine, as a collective, they've lost. They do not get to dictate the terms. They do not get to make the Russians to compromise any more than the Russians want to compromise. And here is the problem. Here is the biggest problem that nobody speaks about. You see, the West is making this out to be about Vladimir Putin. But that's so wrong. This is no longer about Vladimir Putin, if it ever was. Let's assume it was at the beginning. Their animosity towards Vladimir Putin drove to do whatever they did. But it's no longer about Vladimir Putin, because the West's arrogance has pushed them into going way too far. And now the Russian people, the overwhelming majority of the Russian people, they've seen the West as their enemy. So Vladimir Putin, even if he wanted to just wash it all off, be kind, reset the relations with the West, he can't do it. He politically cannot do it because, contrary to the popular belief, Vladimir Putin is not a dictator in Russia.
No.
To him, the public opinion matters a lot. So if the Russian people see the West as their enemy, which they are, because that's what the West has done for the last 3 years almost, well, Vladimir Putin cannot take it upon himself and say, well, from the goodness of my heart, let's reset, let's compromise here, let's compromise there. It won't be any of that. The Russians will not compromise unless they have to. And if you look at the battlefield, they don't have to. They're winning. Putin also lamented the degradation of relations between Russia and Germany due to the unfriendly course of the authorities in Berlin. And that's another spot-on remark. If we look at the relations between Russia and Germany over the last many decades, it was characterized by a very high degree of cooperation. These countries were getting along very well because they needed one another. But this is where the Americans started to wiggle their way, and they saw a danger. They saw a danger not in Russia as much, but in Germany. You see, Germany's manufacturing power was always a threat to the United States. And how did Germany got to be the manufacturing powerhouse that it is? Well, with the cheap Russian energy. So it doesn't take a genius to understand that the Americans wanted to keep the Russians out so they can keep the Germans down. You know that good old saying, keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in. In where? In Europe. Of course, in Europe. This is what Vladimir Putin is talking about. They also had the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would have ensured the future of Germany from a manufacturing perspective. All of this was thrown out the window for what? This is why Putin lamented that, because it's a shame. It's such a shame. Quote, it was agreed that following the conversation, the leaders' assistants would be in touch, the Kremlin noted. And what this means is that in 2 days' time, when the G20 summit in Brazil takes place, Olaf Scholz and Sergei Lavrov will actually get to speak face to face. This is why this phone call has been made at this particular moment in time, because the West believed, well, if this goes even remotely well, we at least have something to talk to the Russians about. When? Well, in 2 days' time at the G20 summit meeting in Brazil. Now, let's move on from this article to the next one. This is Zelensky's reaction. Listen to this. Zelensky criticizes Scholz's call to Putin. There will be no Minsk III. Well, for once, Mr. Zelensky, I agree with you. There is absolutely no way there's going to be a Minsk III. Because during the Minsk I and Minsk II, you've just shafted the Russians, not you personally, but the Europeans. So Vladimir Putin cannot believe and cannot afford the luxury to believe the West anymore, which is why you're not going to get anything similar. In fact, when this is over, Minsk III would look like a birthday cake compared to what you're going to get once this is over. Quote, one of today's news, Chancellor Scholz informed me that he was going to call Putin. Olaf's call, I believe, opens Pandora's box. There may now be other talks or calls, just a lot of words. And this is exactly what Putin has always desired. It is critical for him to weaken his isolation as well as Russia's isolation and to engage in routine conversations that will yield no results. He's been doing it this way for decades. This allowed Russia to avoid changing its strategy or doing anything at all, which is what led to this war. We now understand all of these problems. We understand how to act, and we want to be clear. Minsk III will not happen. We need real peace. Oh, you rest assured, Mr. Zelensky, there is absolutely no way you will receive a Minsk type of agreement, so you can sleep tight. But like I said, my friends, at the beginning, he's made two statements, one of which is nonsense, this is it, and then he's made one in which he actually makes a lot of sense. But let's see what he's saying here. He's talking about Russia's isolation. These people, they refuse to see the big elephant in the room. Russia is not isolated. Whatever you guys don't want to buy from the Russians, others do. Whatever you guys don't want to sell to the Russians, others will do it. This is why Russia is actually winning on the battlefield and in the economy, and on whatever front you want, Russia is winning against the collective West. Do you think they do it by themselves? No, they do it with the support of the rest of the world. And by the rest of the world, I mean anybody and everybody who's not from the Western Hemisphere. These people, the way they talk, they're just so disconnected, either that or they believe we're all stupid and just look at what they're saying without verifying what they're saying. Anyway, he's saying that he wants real peace. We need real peace. Or you will get that. You will get that. You just wait. But you see, they still bank on the fact that they can somewhat push Vladimir Putin into submission. It's not going to happen. The Russians are winning on the battlefield. They're achieving their objectives. In fact, ever since, let's say, mid-August, the speed of the Russian offensive has been far greater than at any other point during this conflict. And it's only pushing harder and harder. In fact, in the second episode I'm going to publish today, we're going to talk about that, just to understand what the situation really is from the green t-shirt himself. So you rest assured, Mr. Zelensky, you will get your real peace very, very soon. Let's move on to this article here. And this is about the other statement of Zelensky. Putin wants to discuss peace, but not make agreement, says Zelensky. Quote, I believe Putin doesn't want peace at all, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to sit down with some leaders at the negotiating table, because for him, it's about breaking his political isolation. And this is where I believe Zelensky is onto something. He's not entirely correct because he's saying that Putin will do this because he wants to break his political isolation. That's not true. But the part that is correct is that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to sit at the negotiating table and negotiate per se. There's nothing to negotiate. What Vladimir Putin will do is sit down with these leaders, as Zelensky states, and he will hand them the terms. You can take it diplomatically, or we will achieve those terms on the battlefield. That's what Vladimir Putin will say to them. And that's what Zelensky believes as well, even though he's putting it in the context of, no, Vladimir Putin is doing this to break his political isolation. No, that's not why, and Zelensky knows it. You see, Zelensky, he's not stupid. He's many things, but stupid he's not. In fact, dare I say, he's far smarter than all of these Western leaders combined. He only appears to be stupid because it's in his favor. Speaking of isolation, let's take this for example. He hears Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz and all of these weasels saying Putin is isolated. Zelensky sees that and says, okay, well, that's the song I must sing. So whenever these guys don't give him what he wants, that's what he says. Says, well, if you don't support Ukraine, Putin will come out of the isolation, will come out of his cage and rip you apart. But he knows, Zelensky knows Putin is not isolated. He knows it best because it's on his border. This conflict is fought in Ukraine. He understands the power of the Russian army and the power of the Russian economy and the power of the Russian war machine. He knows that firsthand. But he only speaks in these terms, he only looks stupid because it's in his favor. For him, it's beneficial to sit, talk, and not come to an agreement. He's unable to travel, and to talk means he has to go somewhere, which requires him to unblock that possibility. It's about dismantling isolation. These are steps in the de-isolation process for Putin as a politician. Mr. Green T-shirt, I think you're not entirely wrong here. I think you're onto something again. You see, as he says, in order to have talks, you have to meet somewhere. So it's either the Western leaders going to the Kremlin, imagine that, imagine that picture with all of these weasels sitting at the table in Moscow. That would be the utmost humiliation. It's either that, or they would have to unblock all of those rules that they've put in place and dismantle all of those ICC warrants in order to speak to Vladimir Putin, which would be a humiliation of another magnitude. So there's no easy way out. And this is why Vladimir Putin is probably enjoying a cigar and a glass of whiskey and just contemplate at that moment. Because for Putin, it's not about the breaking isolation. Come on, it doesn't matter to him. This isolation only exists in these people's minds. But what matters to Putin, I'm sure, to his ego is, you know, there's only a few things better in life than getting to the point where you can say to other people, I've told you so. And that's exactly where we're heading. He would like to negotiate on capitulatory terms from our side, but no one is going to give him that. And that's exactly what it is, my friends. He knows it. Like I said, the green t-shirt is not stupid. He only appears that way when it's in his favor. But let's dissect this because this is very important. He knows that Vladimir Putin will discuss peace and negotiations on those terms. As in, my friends from the West, these are my terms, Ukraine capitulatory terms. This is why I genuinely do not believe that there's going to be a conclusion of this conflict at the table, because that's exactly what Vladimir Putin will demand. And the West, they cannot give him that. From a political perspective, do you honestly imagine Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Scholz, or Merz, or whoever, even Donald Trump, do you imagine signing their defeat? I cannot for one imagine that, because for them, it would be political kaput. They will no longer have a future in politics if they do that, and they know it, which is why I believe that the course of events will be as follows. The United States, Donald Trump, he comes into power, and believe on the 20th of January, he will slowly turn off the tap, the money tap to Ukraine. That will leave the Europeans exposed. They will do whatever they can, but they can't do that much. Eventually, this conflict will be left at the hands of the Russians on the battlefield. That's how I think this will end. It will not end. It will not end diplomatically at the negotiating table. These talks, as Zelensky well points out, these are just to try to see from the West perspective if they can get something from Vladimir Putin. I personally don't think it's possible, because like I said at the previous article, the West has tried to humiliate Vladimir Putin, they tried to humiliate Russia, and they spared absolutely no expense to make that happen. And now, when defeat is upon them, they will not sign it and say, well, we admit we've been defeated. No, they'll do what they always do. They double down, they triple down, and when even that doesn't work, they'll just quietly remove themselves from the situation and will leave the Russians to finish it off on the battlefield. This is what I think will happen. I think that's the only way in which this can end. But this is what we have. We have another article here, and this one is the last one I'm going to cover in this video. Basically, this is a statement from Mr. Tiki. He's the Ukrainian foreign minister. This is what he said. Tiki stressed that for more than 2 decades, Putin has used lengthy conversation as a resource to advance his interests. Currently, conversations only give Putin hope of weakening international isolation. Concrete, strong action is required to force Putin into peace, not persuasion and attempts of appeasement, which he perceives as weakness and uses to his advantage, the statement said. This is a prime example of what projection looks like. Everything that Mr. Tiki says the Russians are doing, that's exactly what the West has done. For example, long conversations, that's exactly what the Minsk Accords were. A way to engage Vladimir Putin in an endless conversation backed up by no action, of course, by the West. In the meantime, what have they done? They opened the floodgates to American and NATO equipment flowing into Ukraine, bolstering the Ukrainian army so they can at least get into a point where they can resist the Russian army. This is all admitted on camera by Angela Merkel and François Hollande. This is no longer a secret, but Mr. Tiki, he thinks we're all stupid. He thinks we've all been born yesterday. No, Mr. Tiki. Also, he's saying that these attempts of appeasement to Vladimir Putin, he will perceive this as a sign of weakness. That's another projection. That's exactly how the West perceived Vladimir Putin the minute he withdrew his army from around Kiev and from around Kharkov in the lead-up or in the follow-up of the Istanbul conversations. They perceived that as weakness. And they genuinely believed, the Western leaders, maybe not Zelensky, but the Western leaders, they genuinely believe that they can defeat Russia on the battlefield. Look, the Russians are fighting with shovels. They're out of missiles any day now, any day. You guys are doing exactly what you're accusing the Russians of doing. That's the prime example of projection. My friends, just to conclude this video, I believe this phone call represents a historic moment, the moment when the West acknowledged their defeat. They haven't admitted to it, not just yet, but they've acknowledged it. And do I believe that this phone call gets us any closer to peace in Ukraine? Absolutely not. And the reason I'm saying that is because the Russians, they have all the tools in order to finish it off, to win it on the battlefield. However, I think this phone call and these sort of conversations, they come in very handy for the life after the conflict. Because once this conflict is over, and I don't think it's too long until that point, there will be a resume. There has to be a resume of the Russian-Western relations. That's very much needed, and that's where I think these phone calls and these conversations come into the picture. Also, it's a very much worth keeping an eye out, and I will report on it, on the G20 summit in Brazil. It's just in a couple of days, because it will be absolutely delightful to watch the dynamics between Sergei Lavrov and the Western leaders. Oh, that's gonna be a sight we won't forget anytime soon. But my friends, I
friends and collaborators doing double duty, the intelligence community rep with Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Gentlemen, thank you very much here. Ray, to you first. Some of the things that Tulsi Gabbard has said about behavior of the executive branch and the intelligence community in the past has delighted me immensely, but I wonder how toothful or toothless, I don't know if toothful is even a word, but you know what I mean, the DNI office is, and how a person with no active intelligence community experience could rein them in, particularly when the CIA is going to be headed by a guy who'll do as has been done in the past.
Judge, Tulsi Gabbard faces an uphill struggle. It's a really formidable challenge. She is substantively qualified to do this. She's smarter than hell, and I know that from personal experience, but she has no experience managing a big organization like the intelligence community. So she'll need somebody to do that for her. And a lot will depend on whom she picks to do that. Substantively, she's really good, except for her trimming her sails later, like 2 months ago on Israel and on Gaza. I was really disappointed in that. I guess that's what she felt she needed to do to gain Trump's favor. On covert action, now, I put it out in my article for Consortium News. She has titular responsibility to advise and oversee covert action proposals by the CIA.
Can she nullify covert action proposals?
Oh, I was just going to say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
No.
Forgive me,
That's
Ray. Forgive me, Ray. I'm a little too anxious here. You're right.
No.
I'm wrong. Continue,
No,
please.
I'm
Larry's
kidding.
laughing because Larry knows what I'm like. Go ahead.
No, I'm kidding. I mean, it's exactly the right question, as usual, Judge. I don't know if she could do that. The odds are very strongly against it. Bill Colby. Now, I served under 9 directors of Central Intelligence.
Wow.
7 presidents. Now, all those DCIs were wary of sharing covert action proposals with substantive analysts because the operations people didn't want to do that. Going back to Cuba, the operations people did not tell the analysts what was going to happen. They didn't tell the analysts about the Bay of Pigs, and they didn't tell the Board of National Estimates that they were telling the president that Castro would be under the gun because people, they are uprise in Cuba, and we will get rid of those damn commies. Arthur Schlesinger, a historian at Kennedy's behest, looked into it, and he said, this is a crazy way to operate an organization. The covert action people kept the analysts in the dark, and so the analysts were unable to advise the president as they should have been able to. This is a cockamamie scheme. There's going to be no uprising on the island of Cuba, and this is bound to fail unless you, Mr. President, unless you come in as you promised not to do and commit U.S. forces to the enterprise. They weren't able to do that because they were cut out of it. Now, Bill Colby, for whom I worked directly back in the mid-'70s, he gave us a look at some of these covert action proposals, and we will tell him, frankly, what we thought of them. Some of them never got into existence, but he was the only one. And so the question is Tulsi Gabbard going to be able to face down those old boys at the CIA who already won one struggle with a new director of national intelligence? I think it was Negroponte, the first one, when he wanted to have the option of appointing chiefs of station for the CIA overseas, and they faced them down. And they got the president saying, "No, that exceeds your authority." Whether the statutory authority on covert action will persist, that really is a big if. I would think the odds are against it, but she's a good sign amid a bunch of other people who are not such good signs.
Larry, if memory serves correctly, you and I argued vociferously against the creation of the DNI, figuring it was just another level of bureaucracy, and whoever it was would be more or less a figurehead. A, do you still feel that way today? B, do you agree with Ray? She's probably not going to be able to affect the culture and illegal, immoral, and unconstitutional behavior of the operations branch.
No, I think actually she's going to be, she'll be effective. And I know who her deputy's going to be. Just can't say it on air right now. I can tell you offline. She'll have a deputy who's quite experienced and knows where all the bodies are buried. I expect what you're going to see is a great downsizing of the national, of the DNI office, because there are a lot of strap hangers there, SIS types that really don't need to be there. Paring back
what's SIS?
The Senior Intelligence Service.
Okay.
So it's people who are the equivalent of a 1-star, 2-star general or higher. The National Counterterrorism Center going to be cut back. So yeah, I think it was actually a very strong choice by Trump. And even though you can tell it's good because John Bolton doesn't like it. When the neocons go crazy, that tells you it's a very effective choice.
Oh, I got to show. I never thought I'd be running John Bolton on this show, particularly to the two of you. But let me show you John Bolton going crazy. Chris, cut number 9.
I think that Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to be director of national intelligence, when I first heard that today, my immediate reaction was hilarious.
Why?
She's totally not competent for that job. Gates is the worst. She may be tracking in at the second worst. Haven't had a lot of time to do research on the Tulsi Gabbard nomination, but let me bring you to January the 8th, 2020, congressional briefing after President Trump's correct decision to eliminate Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Quds Force. She said, Tulsi Gabbard said in an interview with Jake Tapper, that the briefers who described the reasons for the elimination of Qasem Soleimani and how it carried out, she said they provided vague comments, no justification whatsoever for this illegal and unconstitutional act of war that President Trump took. So now is she prepared to abate?
And this is what America got to understand about when they killed Soleimani. Soleimani came into Iraq at the request of the Iraqis to help repel the invader, America. Now, the U.S. military say Soleimani killed American soldiers. Now, imagine this. Now, that's like saying anybody that went into Ukraine can be hunted down later on by Russia. Anybody that went to any Russia can kill anybody who tried to help Ukraine, because the U.S. is saying Russia was the invader. So you had all these different militaries going there to try to help them, like NATO, and they've been killed. Well, Soleimani went in Iraq to help the Iraqis to defeat the invaders, the Americans. So they said Soleimani had to die. That is the hypocrisy. And that's why Tulsi Gabbard, everybody know it was not right to kill a man who had been defeating ISIS. The man was a revolutionary and a hero. We killed him because he humiliated the U.S. They can't justify killing somebody who's helping. You're the invader. People can't help kick you out of the land. That's crazy that the U.S. just can't understand that.
Obey the orders of a man who committed an illegal and unconstitutional act of war as director of national intelligence. Is that the kind of person Donald Trump wants to head that important function?
Yes.
I've believed for a long time that.
See, Trump knew she was right. I'm telling you, Trump said he got tricked into killing Soleimani. He didn't want to have no war with Iran. And then they put that on the table and tried to make him seem like a traitor or a treasonous person who didn't want to stand up for Americans. President, he's got American blood on his hand, just like a movie. He has blood on his hand. He's killed Americans. Yeah, we were the invaders. What the hell you think they're supposed to do when you invade somebody's country and they're helping their neighbors to get you out of there? Come on now. But they're saying Germany, everybody can help Ukraine though, right? But nobody can help Iraq. Think about that. Everybody can help Ukraine defeat the big bully Russia, but nobody can help Iraq defeat the U.S. That's bullshit. And that's hypocrisy. And Tulsi was right. They had no justification killing Soleimani.
Abolished. And now there's another reason to abolish.
And he actually agrees with us on cutting back on the bureaucracy. What she said about the murder of Qasem Soleimani, Larry, was 100% correct.
Yeah.
And it was probably John Bolton who talked Trump into it.
Well, he was one of. I don't recall if he was even there then, but I do know from someone who was involved with those discussions that there was enormous pressure brought to bear on Trump to do it. That Trump was not inclined to do it, and he got bullied. And
that's the truth.
He hasn't forgotten.
That's the truth. He got bullied. So people should bring that up. And I brought that up before. People talk about the war was out. They tried to. Trump had every chance to go to war. The U.S. military begged him to go to war with Iran. He said, "Hell no, I ain't finna go no war. I don't want." So all that he's gonna go to war. You're not listening to the reason he was indicted for classified documents. I told you about that because he left the White House with the proof that the U.S. military set him up and tried to trap him in going to war with Iran. You see, he didn't want war, and he didn't want it with Iran. See, Trump was talk that shit on TV, play tough, but then behind the scenes, he's trying to fight against war, any war. They done it in Syria. Oh, Bashar al-Assad, he gassed his own people. He tried to force Trump. Trump said, but then Trump said, okay, we're going to be bombing stuff. Trump went on TV and talked about all of the stuff they're going to hit and all that, and then hit some empty warehouses, the desert. Everybody know that happened. Trump, and people are laughing, but Putin was applauding. You know, that was the right thing to do, man. Putin told him, you better not be bombing these places in Syria where we at. And Trump, talked about the shiny missiles that was going to be flying to this part of the desert. Man. But he had a chance to go to war in Syria, and he blew up the desert.
Now, let's recognize what in public Trump is talking real tough about Iran. We're going to go hit their nuclear site. Yesterday, he sent Elon Musk to New York to meet with the Iranian UN ambassador.
Yep.
Trump's working behind.
That's something else that I seen yesterday. I haven't got to analyze it, study it, or see what really went on. But when I seen the media don't like that Trump sent Elon Musk, and that's who sent them to go talk to the Iranian ambassador. They talk at peace, man. And the Israelis better understand what Trump letting them know. We're not finna be fighting for Israel. See, they're gonna try to take them out. But Elon Musk, not having to report anything to the U.S. government, he can go as a U.S. citizen and talk to Iran. And he a private citizen. He can talk Turkey. He can talk business. Hey, the U.S. government, they say they don't want to make no business with you. Hey, well, let's see if we can do some business for peace. Come on, man. They hate that.
Behind the scenes, he's going to work a deal. I wouldn't be surprised that sometime within the first year of the Trump administration, we see something like the JCPOA resurface in a different form, and Trump will take credit for it.
Ray, what do we know about John Ratcliffe, who will be the new director of CIA? Will he unleash the operation, subject to what the Gabbard lets him do, unleash the operations division to do whatever they want? Will there still be coups and secret wars and all those crazy things that they've been doing since 1947?
Well, Judge, he will be captive to them for sure. But, the big caveat is what you just mentioned. What will Tulsi Gabbard be able to do in terms of restraining them? She exercises this authority under the National Security Act to fulfill such of the functions and duties as the president shall from time to time direct. That's covert action, okay? Now, we know that the legislation of 2008 provides for her to have an overseership or an advisory capacity on that. So the really weird types of overthrows of governments should go through her, and I know her well enough to think that she'll quit if they circumvent her on something as important as that. As far as Soleimani is, let's remind everyone that when he was killed, he was in Baghdad on a mission, a diplomatic mission to coordinate Sunni and Shia, and he was next, I think, destined for Syria. So he was on a peace mission, and the guys didn't like that. They decided to whack him. The fiction that he was responsible for killing this and that thousands of Americans or planned to do so was just that, a fiction.
Larry, to get your juices going a little bit, here's a montage that Chris put together of Mike Huckabee at his worst. The new U.S. ambassador to Israel, cut number 4.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people really get upset. There's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not, Arab and Persians, and there's such complexity within that. There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel.
The two-state solution, if we maintain two governments holding the same piece of real estate, is irrational and unworkable. If there is a two-state solution, the Palestinian state needs to be outside the boundaries of the nation of Israel. There's plenty of land in the world that we could find a place and say, okay, let's create a Palestinian state. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
Isn't that odd that 2 of the most recent IDF commanding generals in charge of the occupation in Gaza have referred to it as an occupation? The United Nations refers to it as an occupation. The International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, call it an occupation. Larry.
I got the ideal placement. There is plenty of room. I did my honeymoon there. Arkansas. Let's take all the Jewish settlers to Arkansas. Okay?
Somehow I knew that was coming, Larry.
Hot Springs, baby. The home of Bill Clinton, even better. I bet you they can take Mike Huckabee's home and live in it, and he won't mind. He won't mind that these foreign people come to his home, take it over, and kick his ass out. What he said is sickening, disgusting, and disgraceful.
And it's disgraceful that Trump gave him that job.
And yet that is the person and the mentality
old clips
that will
be now that he the ambassador to Israel. What the hell you think he's gonna be saying now? That's just crazy, man. But Trump, he playing a deep game. That shit, he better know what he's doing.
Representing the United States in Jerusalem and giving Netanyahu or his successor, if Netanyahu ever leaves, as long as Trump is in, whatever he wants, right?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to add, and given Tulsi Gabbard's conversion to the Zionist cause over the last several months, there's no guarantee that she may feel courageous enough to say Mike Huckabee doesn't know what he's talking about. In other words, for Mike Huckabee, God is a real estate agent, right? And he gave a certain piece of real estate to the Jews. That's unbiblical. That's crazy, okay? They cite Deuteronomy 15:4. It was a deal. The first part was, you shall have this wonderful land. The second part was, so there shall be no poor among you. In other words, it was a deal. It was a covenant, okay? And when you see the West Bank, as I have several times, you could see there are lots of poor among them. And the pristine, pure lawns that are being watered on top of those hills with the Israeli settlers, they speak real injustice when you look down the hill and there's no running water, there's nothing much to eat. It's utter poverty down there. So Huckabee's got it all wrong. To the degree he believes it, is equally mischievous that he's one of these Christian Zionists.
Larry, how will Marco Rubio compare with Sergei Lavrov, his opposite number in Moscow?
He'll show up, if they put him side by side, he'll look like Mini-Me, from the Dr. Evil series. So, the Lavrov can, put maybe a little chain around his neck, have him dance around like a little organ grinder monkey. Look, I don't think Rubio is sacrificing in some aspects his future for his ambition. Because what's interesting about this, Rubio, he's not sitting on loads of money. He's not an independently wealthy man. And he's just basically given up a lifetime job in the Senate that he could have hung on to for a while. Maybe he wanted to run for governor at some point. But now he's entirely dependent on Donald Trump. And so Trump can fire him at any point. So what I see is Marco's not going to be pursuing a Marco agenda. Marco's going to be pursuing a Donald Trump agenda, and Trump's going to be calling the shots, not Marco.
I think that that's the case with all of these appointees. I almost think that Donald Trump does not want thinking people to advise him or restrain him. He wants clerks to execute his wishes in grand and in minute ways. Larry, before I jump over to Ray, Pete Hegseth has told Trump privately and publicly that we should be bombing civilian sites in Tehran. Now, this is before he was nominated to be Secretary of Defense. Wouldn't you expect the Secretary of Defense to say, wait a minute, you want to destroy bridges in Tehran? Or is Putin's going to destroy bridges in Miami? Do you realize that there's going to be consequences to this? But Pete will say, when do you want it done, sir?
Yeah. Now, I look, Trump ran as an anti-war president. He didn't want to start any new wars. If he retreats, backflips on that promise, he'll be a dead president. He will have lost all credibility. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't know what the motive was for Hegseth, but I don't think Hegseth's going to get approved. Hegseth is not competent for the job. He doesn't have any depth of history or knowledge about any of the critical regions in the world. He just sort of repeats neocon talking points.
Right.
Again, I'll tell you offline the name of who's standing in the wings to take over when he goes face first. Plus, there are already words out there. The guy's been married 4 or 5 times. There's a charge of a sexual case out in California that never got charged, but is definitely he said, she said situation. The last thing Trump's going to want now with this guy is someone who's having to beat off all of these attacks. And a similar thing with Gates. Gates is not going to be confirmed.
Oh my God. Gates brought to mind the Roman Emperor Caligula nominating his horse for the Roman Senate. I'm sorry. The AG doesn't have to be Nino Scalia type, but he should be a universally respected lawyer. Larry sent a fascinating clip of Donald Trump in 2015. Listen to what he says about the relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's 2 minutes long, and the best part is at the end.
Both sides, to make a deal, have to want to make it. I have my own views. I want to keep them quiet for a little while because if I ever end up in the midst, that would be a great achievement to get a real peace. And I want to meet with Bibi. I'm going to be probably going over there pretty soon. And I want to see him. I want to see other people. I want to get some ideas on it because, frankly, that has been, and I say it to everybody, that has been the all-time difficult deal. They've been working on it for so many decades. I mean, it just never ends. But the key is a lasting peace. If you have a lasting peace, first thing you have to ask, do they both want to make it? I have a real question as to whether or not both sides wants to make it. I have a real question as to one side in particular, whether or not they want to make it. Well, I don't want to say that right now. I think one side actually would like a deal, and I think the other one maybe doesn't want a deal, to be honest. I don't want to say it. No, look, we show our cards too much in the I wrote The Art of the Deal. We show our cards too much. So if I get into that, I don't want to say this and that, and then they'll come and they'll say, well, Trump is biased one way or the other. I think there's a chance that you could probably make a deal if you had a real deal maker, if you had somebody that knew what he or she was doing. In my opinion, if Israel wants to make a deal, I think a deal could be made. I think it will be made at some point. I think if I get elected, that would be something I'd really like to do because so much death, so much turmoil, so much hatred, that would be to me a great achievement. As a single achievement, that would be a really great achievement. I think a lot is going to do with Israel. And it's going to have to do with both sides, but a lot will have to do with Israel and whether or not Israel wants to make the deal, whether or not Israel's willing to sacrifice certain things. They may not be, and I understand that, and I'm okay with that, but then you're just not going to have a deal. So we'll see what happens. I'll let you know in about, if I win, I'll let you know 6 months from the time I take office. I will have a very good idea as to whether or not a deal can be made.
Obvious that in 2015, he thought that the obstinate, obstreperous ones were Netanyahu and the Zionists. Of course, the so-called deal that he made, the Abraham Accords, did nothing nothing for the Palestinian people and didn't even allow them to participate in the negotiations for it. Ray.
Well, that's exactly right. When Jared Kushner was giving the portfolio to do a deal there, he did the kind of deal that you just suggested. There was nothing in it for the Palestinians. I would remind our viewers that it's exactly 20 years since Yasser Arafat was assassinated by the Mossad. The Swiss doctors that looked at what happened to him testified to the fact that it was polonium. It was slow-acting polonium. That shows how much the Israelis, even then, wanted a two-state solution. They never have wanted it. They want the whole deal, and that is the fly in the ointment. Netanyahu doesn't want a deal. He wants to exterminate. He wants genocide for the Palestinians, and we are enabling him to do that. And the answer will be whether Trump is any better than Biden in assisting and enabling the killing of a whole group of people, namely the Palestinians.
Gentlemen, we have to go because Larry Wilkerson is coming up. Thank you very much for your time. As always, we'll see you both
on Twitter, X at Mark Sloboda1, Substack and Telegram at The Real Politic with Mark Sloboda. And my Substack is always free, so don't worry about that.
Wonderful. All right, let's get started. So everybody's talking about the Trump appointments, you know, the usual ghouls. You got Tulsi Gabbard in there. That's something to think about. You got now Gates, who's supposedly going to look at all manner of Russiagate things and all. And of course, some I will say this before you get started. Based on what happened before, where Trump went through like 3 Secretary of States or something and 4 Secretary of Defense, we'll call this the first draft. By the time January 20 gets here, some of them might be replaced. Donald Trump can tend to be impetuous at times. So the first draft of appointments by Donald Trump. Your thoughts, Mark Sloboda?
Yeah, so I think there are some common threads in Trump's picks that we've seen so far. At least the foreign policy, security, and military ones, which is really the only ones I care about. There seems to be a lot more neocons than most Trump fanboys were expecting, at least the ones who might be listening to this show. I don't know why they're surprised, considering Trump's first administration, but nonetheless, there is some dismay, some shock, some gnashing of teeth and pulling of hair, beating of chest. But I certainly don't see it as a surprise. So yes, Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley were passed over, primarily because of all because of all the nasty things they said about Trump in the last 4 years. But far be it from Trump for someone like Trump to hold a grudge. No, that's not. But instead of Pompeo and Nikki Haley, we got essentially young Pompeo and Nikki Haley, right? Because there are enough neocons to go around from Trump's appointment to the UN, a young woman who will almost certainly do John Bolton justice, considering what a neocon she is. From Mike Waltz as the national security advisor, and on top of everything he has to say about the necessity of bombing Iran and confronting China, he has done photo ops with Azov, before with Azov militants, and said he would get out what heroes they are to the American people. There's that. John Ratcliffe as the CIA director, and of course, you know, the neocon bête noire Mark Rubio as Secretary of State, probably the most important cabinet position of them all. You know, after the U.S. president, I would say the Secretary of State is usually more important than who the vice president is. And despite all of the back and forth over the last few years between Trump and Mark Rubio, yet Mark Rubio is the selection. I mean, he certainly did go an about face in the last month, and suddenly he's not so interested in pursuing the proxy war in Ukraine, and he mouthed off, you know, the requisite America First lines to make him more acceptable, to be polished up and brought into the Trump administration. But if you think the man has changed, then, well, I've got a bridge in Crimea I'd like to sell you. Trump previously on social media has called out Mark Rubio as a pet creature, a fully financed pet creature of the recently departed American Israeli oligarch Sheldon Adelson. He was quite explicit in calling Mark Rubio Adelson's pet creature, in those words. And lo and behold, not only is Mark Rubio his pick for Secretary of State, but Trump's largest single financial contributor to his campaign was the widow of Sheldon Adelson. So go figure. This was obviously a demand, a cash for position scheme. Absolutely no corruption here, you know. Nothing to worry about. But Mark Rubio is in, and Mark Rubio has his own agenda, and I have no doubt that he will be very active in pushing it. He is, you know, the kind of like the poster child of the young up and coming powerful neocon of this generation. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. He does have a military background in the National Guard and so forth, but once again, he is a neocon. You know, it's for a lot of these people, it's not even really America first, it's more Israel first. And I think we can see where Trump's foreign policy is going with a lot of these picks, particularly on Israel. And Mark Rubio's already tweeting about peace through strength, which,
oh yeah,
you know, the strength has got to come first before the peace. I can't help but notice that. And you know, you have to demonstrate that strength, of course, something the U.S. actually hasn't done a really good job of in the last few years. So I think there is going to be a definite push to Trump from these now close advisors of his that will be pushing him to display that strength, to teach, you know, Putin and the mullahs, as they call the leadership in Iran and so forth, you know, who's boss. I think that will probably be something very quick out the gate, despite his campaign rhetoric of not wanting any more foreign wars. The one standout from these picks, you could say Matt Gaetz is Attorney General. That's a big, you know, middle finger to the national legal establishment that pursued these hoax Russian agent claims against him. And I'm sure Matt Gaetz will have some fun there if he manages to get confirmed. But that's primarily a domestic matter, so kind of below the radar for me. But I would have to say that Tulsi Gabbard, who recently switched from, well, she had been a Democrat and then independent. Now she's joined the Republican Party, I guess, to make it more palatable for her to be given a position. If she had been Secretary of State, that would have been something. Still, she has been given the position of Director of National Intelligence. And she has had some very sharp criticisms of neocon foreign policy over the years, and Biden's foreign policy, which was essentially a neocon foreign policy. And in fact, she has not so long ago in social media been calling Mark Rubio in the same government she's in now, or she's selected to be, a neocon warmonger, right? Quote unquote. So I think that it will be difficult for Trump to get Tulsi Gabbard through the nomination and ratification process in the U.S. legislature. First and foremost, every single Democrat will vote against her as they see her as a traitor.
As they will with every single person the Rubio they won't. They'll all vote in.
Yes, Rubio. They'll be happy to appoint Rubio and perhaps a few others there. Mike Waltz. We'll see, but definitely, not Tulsi Gabbard. And there are almost certainly going to be enough Republicans who will dissent from their new president or president-elect at the present time in order to express their displeasure over her foreign policy views, her having been a recent convert to the Republican Party, and so forth. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is hated on bipartisan consensus basis. It was famously Hillary Clinton that called her a Russian agent, as neocons like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney were flocking to her banner. She is the one, in my mind, the only lone independent voice against the neocons, against a U.S. foreign and military policy of hegemony within the administration of note, of a significant position. I imagine this will make national security meetings quite tense, right? Imagining her and Mark Rubio and Mike Waltz across the table at each other as they're advising bombing Iran and launching missiles into Russia. That should be quite interesting. It would, of course, nice to be a fly on the wall, and maybe we'll get some leaks. But she has not shied away before of calling these people what they are. So if she manages to get through the nomination process, I think that, first of all, it indicates that Trump is once again, what so many foreign leaders, and including Putin, but many others, even among U.S. allies, have talked about Trump. The worst thing about Trump is his unpredictability, right? If you want to talk about the madman theory of international relations, Trump definitely very self-consciously adopts that persona. You don't know what he's going to do, and maybe he doesn't know what he is going to do. Maybe that's why he's included one anti-hegemonic voice among all the neocons he's selected. Maybe he likes his underlings to curry for his favor, make their arguments, and then he gets to play the decider. Maybe that flatters his ego, and it's not so much a cogent foreign policy vision. We'll see going forward. But if Tulsi Gabbard does make it through the nomination process, I will be very interested to see how long she lasts in that position amongst all the others. If you'll remember that in the first Trump administration, he also nominated some standout figures that were against orthodox U.S. Foreign policy promoted by neocons on both sides of the aisle. General Flynn, who was axed right away. They got rid of him as the biggest threat who could have defended Trump. And very interestingly, Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson, although, say what you want, and I've got lots to say about him being the, CEO of a major American oil company, yes. But as Secretary of State, he did not fit the usual mold. He was more of a transactional realist, as Trump professed to be. And he refused to hypocritically weaponize the issue of human rights against America's chosen adversaries. He just refused to step into that hypocritical pile of feces. And there was even this very famous, it was in the Western media, a leaked memo where the permanent bureaucrats in the State Department, they tried to explain to him, look, you don't understand. This is what we do. We weaponize the issue of human rights against our enemies, and we give our allies and ourselves a complete pass. And, obviously Rex Tillerson wasn't playing to that tune, but we saw Rex Tillerson replaced, by none other than Mike Pompeo himself after his service as director of the CIA. So I wonder how long Tulsi Gabbard will survive in that environment if she manages to make it through the nomination process. But she'll be one lone warrior for any kind of sanity amongst all the neocon madness. And, hats off to her.
Yeah, one very powerful warrior. You know what I mean? I mean, the CIA director reports to her every day. It is the DNI that gives the daily intelligence briefing to Donald Trump. And that's the difference between the person that says the Russians are losing because they're fighting with shovels and they're out of missiles, and the person that says, here's the truth. You know what I mean? One other thing, go ahead, Mark, and then I'll say, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because, of course, Trump hates the U.S. security services, right? Particularly,
yes, he does.
The FBI, but not only the FBI. We know he doesn't trust, what the CIA were telling him either. And this is obviously another Trump throwing a middle finger to, the U.S. intelligence establishment and positioning what many there, have, and this has been expressed quite openly. There's a U.S. House of Representatives, a woman who was former CIA, and she's already gone ballistic on social media about how insulted she is against Tulsi Gabbard's nomination because she's Putin's puppet, right? Because she doesn't toe, the foreign policy orthodoxy of hegemony. And Tulsi Gabbard was put on by the Joe Biden administration on the terrorist watch list. Now she's going to be in charge of that entire process, which is absolutely a little bit of Schadenfreude. So I'm not terribly confident about one lone person at the DNI being able to hold back the tide of neocons that we now see in the Trump administration, but I certainly do get a bit of Schadenfreude from it.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this, Trump beat the hell out of those people. He stomped the Democrats and everybody else into the ground. It is what it is. Whatever you think about Trump, he was a political tsunami in this country, right? I've told people, people are like, you picked Trump all along. And I said, man, I went up in Baltimore City. I've been on this country. I'm honest about things. I seen Black folks riding around with Trump bumper stickers. When I saw that, I said, it's over. Because the fact of the matter is, the Democrats, if they lose the Black vote, they are not a viable party. You know what I mean? That's such a part of their what they get. You know what I mean? It's like they run in a given state, and the numbers come in, and they're like, oh, they're $10,000-$20,000 behind. Well, wait, the numbers haven't come in from Philadelphia or Chicago, whatever that given state is, right? The black vote comes in, they're down by 10,000 points, and they win by 10,000 points. When those people are running around with Trump bumper stickers, as a matter of fact, I was covering this thing on election night. And generally, when it gets up to like, oh, let's say Pennsylvania, and they're like 88% in, and Trump's up by 5 points, usually the Democrats are going to win because it comes in from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, right? Boom, that bumps the Democrats over. So usually, the Republican, unless he's got a big lead, he's going to win. This year, when it hit 85, 88%, 80%, the numbers for Trump started rising. Never saw that before. So I knew it's over. People are done with the Democrats. Infuriating at the Democrats, right? As well they should be. Here's my point. If Trump really wants somebody through and he goes and starts using the bully pit, leaning on these members of Congress, he got everything, all of the Republicans and most of everybody else. A member of Congress knows, senator, whoever, if they go home and Trump is pissed at them and he's unhappy with them, and he says to the people in their district, I ain't happy with them, they're gone. They're done. He has so much political capital. If he decides that he wants to spend some of it, I damn guarantee he's going to do it with Matt Gaetz because he wants some revenge. But if he wants to spend it on those two people, and he needs to, because the MAGA people were furious. They were like, oh, I can't believe this. And then the MAGA people saw Gaetz and Gabbard, and they're like, okay, we'll give you a break we'll give you a little more rope before we go.
Yeah, he tossed them a bone. He tossed them a couple bones.
Exactly. If he decides to spend the political capital to get them through, you can't stop him because he had so much coming in. You know what I'm saying?
I can't argue with that. He's got some heft right now. There's no question about that. There's no attempts to question his victory on either side of the aisle this time. And I have to say, I'm originally from coal country, Pennsylvania myself, Pennsylvania. So I was watching the vote from afar in Pennsylvania closely myself. I have to say that all of the Democratic voices in the media and everything that right after the election were blaming Trump being elected on misogynist Black and Hispanic men. Yeah, not a smart play for the future of the demographics there. I just got to say, who's the real racist here? I have to say that. But I would also point out the Amish came out in force for Donald Trump, which is just kind of blew my mind. It was mind shattered. But I saw that and I'm like, man, if they've got African American men and the Amish voting for it, I'm not betting against you. Not in populist politics, that's for sure.
Well, we saw Trump running around. He was the French fry cook one day. Then he was with an orange vest. So I guess in the midterms, he's going to have on suspenders and a straw hat. He'll be walking behind a plow with a horse or something. He loves those.
He knows how to play the popular vote. He does. He knows how to play social media. He knows how to play it. He has a kind of, if you want to say a cunning, a base instinct for what plays to the common person that the Democratic elite, the party that once proclaimed to be the voice of the working class, which certainly it is not now, it is not getting their vote. And Trump, about as far from working class as you can possibly get, yet he managed to speak to them in terms, that appealed to them. So it shows a type of political charisma and genius that you would really be hard pressed to deny at this point.
Well, for people who don't understand that, I'm going to tell them, knowing New York City, I will tell you right now why it is that Trump has that ability. If you understand Manhattan, you understand the boroughs, Trump was born in Queens. Even though he was born a lot of money, he was born in Queens. the snooty Manhattaners look down at the Queens people. Oh, don't touch us, you filthy little Queens people. They might as well be from rural Mississippi, right? If you notice the way he talks, they've got their, they've all got their pinky up. They've got the right salad fork. And you know what I mean? They're on the Upper East Side. They're the Queens people. I don't care how much money you got. He's a member of the unwashed. He's the lower, the hoi polloi, as they say, right? So my point being, there is a dynamic in New York City that he experienced, that those same limousine liberals in New York City saw him as the Queen's outsider, the filthy little unwashed who doesn't speak our language, and he's uncultured. So he's familiar with that dynamic. People that don't understand the ruling elite and have not been around a bunch of rich people got to understand that. And fortunately or unfortunately, I've had the experience to be around some really, really rich people and some really, really some of the events that they have and stuff, right? And you start to realize the snobbery amongst the ruling elite. They can find the smallest little reason to divide themselves. Well, yes, I'm worth $1 billion and you're worth $1 billion, but, and then there comes the, you didn't go to the right school, your family didn't come over on the Mayflower at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. So they can be the snobbiest bastards in the world amongst themselves. And a guy from Queens, oh no, he might as well be a trash truck driver. I don't care how much money you have. So you know what I'm saying? They created that dynamic where he understands how to look at them and say, you Upper East Side liberals, you think I'm a filthy old Queens nobody. So that allows him to identify with the guy who says, I fix transmissions. And that's what I do for a living. I'm a transmission mechanic. That's how I feed my family. And these friggin' Yale liberals look at me like I'm a piece of dirt. You know what I mean? Like I'm not. So that dynamic is there for Trump, if you understand what I'm saying. It makes perfectly sense if you understand the dynamic of the Upper East Side liberals versus the rest of the boroughs.
Never let it be said that America's elite doesn't have their own blue blood tradition.
Now, we got important things. Granted, they're going to they're practicing democracy in Germany, and by practicing democracy, that means they're going to try to get rid of the AfD, who's probably going to come in second in the election. That's an interesting way of practicing democracy. But the Ukrainians are next. The word's out, Mark. They're going to have a free and fair elections in the free and fair elections in the way that Tony Blinken would see a free and fair election, in the way that when Hillary Clinton said we should not have allowed the Palestinians to have an election unless we could control the outcome. I suspect that's what's happening. What do you think about the free and fair elections that are clearly, absolutely going to happen next year in Ukraine?
Okay, so I mean, let's touch briefly first on the quote free unfair elections that they're going to have in Germany. So the German stoplight coalition government, this long fragile government between Olaf Scholz's SPD, the social, nominally socialist, not really, but the Greens, again, not really Greens, but more neocons. And the pro-business Free Democrats has at last collapsed. And I mean, it was long brewing, and Olaf Scholz's unpopularity is practically legendary in Germany at this point. It was an extremely weak coalition, but the Free Democrats have broken. Scholz fired Linzer, the leader of the Free Democrats, whose position was finance minister, ostensibly over the issue of aid for Ukraine, because Germany has a 9 billion euro hole in its budget, and they also have constitutional measures where they have to balance the budget after a certain time. Basically, Scholz and Baerbock were pushing Linzer to just look at past and rack up some more debt so he can send more money to Ukraine. And Linzer, with an eye on the future and trying to salvage his own party, I mean, the Free Democrats are always hinging right on the 5% Bundestag threshold of getting into the German parliament. So perhaps with an eye towards that, he made a public issue out of it and said no, and Scholz got rid of him. Well, that ends the coalition. The quote-unquote opposition Christian Democratic Union, which is now the first in popularity, just barely the first most popular party in Germany. That was the party of Angela Merkel. They've called for a vote of no confidence, and new elections have already been scheduled for February. And the members of the coalition are going to be wiped out. I mean, the Greens are incredibly popular. The SPD, unfortunately, what it probably means is that the Christian Democratic Union, which is even more rabidly pro-Kiev and more rabidly anti-Russian than even the government was. Meinzer, the leader of the Christian Democrats, he has already essentially promised to send Taurus cruise missiles and to launch ultimatums at Putin to stop the SMO. So despite the fact that German voters in the local elections we have seen in the last few months, there was a huge break with the German population joining to either the far right, quote unquote, Alternative for Germany, or the new far left Sarah Wagenknecht party in Germany, because both of them took a stand on two issues. One, they were against further support for the Kiev regime in Ukraine, and they were either critical or extremely skeptical about the current migration rules. And that is the pillar right now of not only the SPD but also the Christian Democratic Union policy-wise. So they did not learn any lesson from that, from those beatings up in local elections, particularly in East Germany. And despite obviously the German population is going to break big in that direction, they're still going to end up with an even more warmongering government, more than likely, because there will still be enough of the German population that are trapped in the center-right, center-left shuffle. And so will vote for instead of voting for the SPD, they'll vote for the Christian Democratic Union. They'll be too scared of the fear-mongering about the AfD, which are caricatured as fascists, or the Sarah Wagenknechts, which are caricatured as communists. And despite obvious German public sentiment turning against support for the Kiev regime in Ukraine, they'll end up with an even more rabidly pro-Kiev government, almost assuredly. Whether the Christian Democratic Union will probably have to do it with some type of coalition. They've said that they won't do a coalition, a grand coalition with the SPD again, such as Angela Merkel had to maintain power. But I think that's probably still the most likely outcome. As for Ukraine, there's lots of talk. The Russian intelligence agency, the SVR, once again released a warning that the U.S. is once again thinking about getting rid of Zelensky, and so they're below the radar, supposedly pushing for elections in Ukraine next year in order to replace him democratically, rather than staging another putsch in the country. And, you know, he doesn't have any legitimacy as president. He's only in power by extensions of martial law, his presidential term, such as it was. I don't consider any elections in Ukraine since 2014 legitimate. So here's the problem with that. If there is such a plan, it would have to survive a transition period. It would have to actually be grown in a transition period between Biden and Trump. And that seems...
Revolutionary salute to our Queen Toolbox Evolution for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute to you.
Questionable to me. At the same time, The Economist, the rabidly anti-Russian British publication of record, is now also talking about rumors about elections in Ukraine, that certain NGOs, being pushed by the West or trying to work on it, and that some people who might be a presidential rival, totally not Zelensky. We're not mentioning Zelensky. We're not mentioning the Banderite fascist general himself who was removed by Zelensky, but that is, I'm sure, the top of most people's minds. Certainly, the West views him as an acceptable replacement for Zelensky. The question is, can they stage an election without having a ceasefire in Ukraine? Probably not. That's probably physically impossible. And can they get a ceasefire? Evidently that is going to be the big, whatever plan Trump puts out there, a ceasefire is almost certainly going to be item number one. And Russia's going to look down the list, sit down for negotiations and say ceasefire. No, we already told you, no ceasefire until there's a settlement. Yet, no. And so there's that whole deal is just going to go out the window right there. And if Russia doesn't agree to any ceasefire, and they have said repeatedly, we have zero interest in a ceasefire. Why would we give you time to rearm and conscript and train up the Kiev regime when we have every advantage at the front? It makes no sense. We've got the initiative, we've got the dynamism, we're ahead in manpower and artillery and drones and tanks and air power and everything else at this point. Why would we do that? And then I can't come up with a good reason why they would do that. So that's more to the point. So I don't think there's anything to these stories yet. I think the U.S. has flirted with the idea previously, but the time just never felt right for them to remove him. They had put too much political capital in Zelensky, which was probably a huge mistake. He acts like this entitled, spoiled, monstrous child now, who throws a fit every time he doesn't get what he wants, and of course is never satisfied with whatever you give him. And I think that is it's reached the proportions that even the populations of Western countries who normally don't think anything about foreign policy issues, even I think there's a bit of, Zelensky is no longer the hero, right? He's no longer the Churchillian figure that they tried to paint him as. Instead, he's a spoiled child who always wants more. I think that perception at some level is growing, even in the general population at this point, and which makes providing more money and arms for Ukraine more difficult. At the same time, as Trump at least has talked about a deal and ending the war and dictating terms to Russia, which Russia will never accept, and to the Kiev regime. Europeans are freaking out and going in the opposite direction. Germany is talking conscription. And as I mentioned, the leader of the Christian Democratic Union is practically salivating at the idea of providing Taurus cruise missiles here in the next few months. The top Polish general says we need to prepare for a war against Germany yesterday. And good old Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom has come out and said that if the U.S. stops if Trump stops aid to Ukraine, which I don't actually think is on the cards, maybe a reduction, but canceling it completely, I think there too much of an argument will be made. You're going to steal Americans' jobs from the military-industrial complex that will whisper in Trump's ears. The neocons are really good at twisting any issue like that. But Boris Johnson says if U.S. aid to Ukraine stops, then the United Kingdom will have to send troops to defend Kiev.
Whoa! Oh, that changes everything.
I'm considering they've given every single artillery piece they have to Ukraine, every single self-propelled howitzer that the British Army had, they sent, and by their own estimates, they've got enough artillery shells for 2 to 3 days worth of war against Russia. I don't actually regard that as a threat. I regard that as a
Well, they can put them all. They can put them all in a single double-decker bus. You know,
but
I mean, with the amount of trips, they one double-decker bus, head right to the front, boom, that gets smacked by them. They won't even need a missile. Like one artillery round flattens that, and then they're out of the game.
But of course they will, in such an instance, just as like Macron would have when he was and has recently been talking smack about sending French troops as well. Both would rely on the United States to come and pull their bacon out of the fry pan.
I wouldn't have to. If I were them, I wouldn't bet on Trump pulling my.
Neither would I. But
you bet on Trump. Yeah, that one may come up flat with them. All right.
I wouldn't bet on him, and I wouldn't bet against him.
Exactly. And if he tells them I got you covered, then they're really. That's like when a coach said, when the owner says, I'm 100% behind this coach, and I respect him. He's doing a good. He's going to get fired within a week. So I put it like this: they better rethink the direction they're going because it ain't going to work out well for them. They don't have I don't think Trump even likes them. I don't think Trump.
I'm sure he hates them.
He doesn't like those guys.
Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, literally sent people to help Kamala Harris's part, which was like they could not. There's nothing they could have done to aid the election, and it was politically just about the most stupid thing. Because, I mean, by any measure, they should have had at least Trump 50% chance could win. And why would they do that? But, anything that's going to help split the United States from the rest of NATO, I mean, let's just applaud their stupidity. Good job, guys.
Trump is a very, very vindictive man. He is a very vindictive man. Oh,
I'm going to enjoy watching him just castigate and slap European leaders around as again, I may not like the man, and I certainly don't like all the neocons he's elected, but I just want to see a party where him and Orban are and maybe Robert Fico are dancing in the meme on the floor, and Keir Starmer is in a corner talking to a potted plant. They don't realize how much they need me.
Oh man, Orban's already started the "I told you so" stuff. Him and Fico, they got to be loving this. They are doing the we tried to tell you over and over. We thought, like your parents. We talked to you and talked to you. We told you over and over not to ride that bicycle and that. And now look at you. Your arms, your legs, your arms broken. We got to take you to the hospital and get that put back together.
All they had to do was shut up. Right? They just say nothing about the U.S. election, and they could have come out at least even. But they're too dumb for that. They're too ideological. They have to take sides, and it's come back to bite them.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that, let's get to Ukraine. What in the heck is going on the ground? Every other day, every day, there is another town that I cannot pronounce, which is pretty much every town in Ukraine that has fallen. Are there any towns left that haven't fallen in Ukraine yet? And if so,
unfortunately not. There is still thousands and thousands of towns whose names you'll have to not learn into the future. But the most important developments on the battlefield. Real quickly, Russia is on their third, shall we say, counteroffensive wave in Kursk, and is pressing really hard on the heart of the Kiev regime incursion. They're salient in the Kursk region, which is the only town of any size, which is 5,000, so it's not much, but the town of Sudzha. And right now, Russia is pressing hard on the outskirts of Sudzha. They're trying to essentially, cut off supply lines and do what they can to put it in an operational cauldron. But there's very heavy fighting, and the Kiev regime, they've sent everything they can to Kursk for no reason other than political demands that anyone can understand. Zero strategic sense. all of the east, all of the Donbass, the defenses are crumbling, but still everything goes to Kursk. So they're hanging just barely still in Kursk. But they warn that Russia has a 50,000 strong force about to enter the play there, supposedly with the invisible North Korean super soldiers that no one has actually seen except for Zelensky, apparently. But you know, if you want to buy into that, I don't. Not that I would care if they were, but I don't think I have not seen a whit of evidence that any of that is true. You know, maybe they'll be fighting against the ghost of Kiev and the Snake Island martyrs or something. I don't know. But the other big areas on the battlefield, of course, Russia, it appears, has finally begun the long-awaited Zaporozhye offensive in the direction of Gulay Polya and in the Vremovsky salient region. And they seem to be making some pretty rapid advances there already. Karahava is being taken into, they're past an operational encirclement. They're moving towards a physical encirclement. There's some big open field battles over trench networks going on just south of Pokrovsk. And I would say the big development on the battlefield is in the southern Kharkov region, where Russian forces have just broken through the Kiev regime's defenses in an extremely unexpected thrust and have already moved into northern Kupiansk, which is north of this last defensive line in the Donbass region, the Slavyansk Kramatorsk line. So it's going to be it's a very important strategic location. It will allow Russia to then move on to Liman and Izium and take that last defensive line from the north. This is territory that Russia withdrew from in the autumn of 2022 when they had that manpower shortage because the Kremlin went in with too small of a force and didn't mobilize troops while the Kiev regime did. They were forced to withdraw from Kherson and Kharkov region. Now they're back in a big way in both, of course, particularly in the Kharkov region right at the moment. And I don't think anyone was expecting Russian forces to already be fighting inside Kupiansk, to have broken so quickly through Kiev regime defensive lines in that direction. So that's definitely something to watch. But once again, whether we're talking south central Donbass or now the Kupiansk area, everything to the east, the Kiev regime is in an operational crisis. Their defenses are already crumbling, if not collapsing, almost everywhere. And Russia is just steamrolling from victory to victory that even the Western mainstream media can no longer ignore.
The colonization of Africa by European countries has had a profound and lasting impact on the continent. The levels of crime, financial exploitation, developmental setbacks, and immense human costs have left deep scars, many of which are still felt today. However, Africa's relationships with countries outside Western Europe have taken on a different shape, often built on a foundation of more mutual respect and shared benefits. Russia's relationship with Africa, for example, has been marked by a fairer approach focused on mutual respect and dignity. Unlike the exploitative nature of colonial relationships, Russia's trade and diplomatic ties with African countries have aimed at fostering partnerships. Recently, Russia announced the cancellation of $20 billion worth of African debt, a move expected to bring significant benefits to African economies. By alleviating the debt burden, African nations can redirect resources towards socioeconomic projects that will fuel sustainable development. China is another major player that has expanded its presence in Africa. China's investment in infrastructure, technology, and trade partnerships has made it a substantial contributor to the continent's growth. With projects ranging from railways to digital infrastructure, China's involvement is not only reshaping African cities and economies, but also helping foster a sense of economic self-sufficiency across the continent. This video will explore the evolution of Africa's relationships with Russia and China, highlighting how these partnerships have transformed over the years and the impact they're likely to have on accelerating the continent's growth. Additionally, we'll discuss the recent expansion of BRICS, a coalition that now includes South Africa, Ethiopia, and Egypt, which gives Africa...
See, the West not writing off $20 billion in debt. See, they sick. The IMF is sick that BRICS done wrote off $20 billion in debt from the African nations. That's going to help them, come up out of the situation they in.
Africa a larger voice in the bloc. Let's start with the history of the Russia-Africa relationship throughout the years. The relationship between Russia and African nations has evolved significantly from the early 20th century to the present day, encompassing periods of limited interaction, strategic alliances during the Cold War, a hiatus following the Soviet Union's collapse, and a resurgence of engagement in recent years. In the early 1900s, Russia's involvement in Africa was minimal, primarily characterized by exploratory missions and limited diplomatic engagements. Notably, in 1897, the Russian Empire established a consulate in Tangier, Morocco, marking one of its initial formal diplomatic presences on the continent. The decolonization wave of the 1950s and 60s presented the Soviet Union with opportunities to expand its influence in Africa. Moscow supported various liberation movements and newly independent states, providing military aid, economic assistance, and ideological backing. For instance, during the Algerian War of Independence from 1954 to 1962, the Soviet Union supplied military, technical, and material support to the National Liberation Front. In Ethiopia, the Soviet Union established diplomatic relations in 1943 and later became a key ally following the 1974 revolution that ousted Emperor Haile Selassie. The USSR provided substantial military and economic aid, particularly during the Ogaden War from 1977 to 1978, where Soviet support was crucial in repelling Somali forces. Similarly, in South Africa, the Soviet Union maintained relations with the African National Congress during the apartheid era, offering support to the anti-apartheid movement. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 led to a significant reduction in Russia's engagement with Africa. Economic challenges and a focus on internal restructuring resulted in the closure of several embassies and a decline in trade and military cooperation. For example, Russia's trade with African countries dropped from $5.9 billion in 1985 to $0.98 billion in 1995. In the 2000s, Russia began to reestablish its presence in Africa, seeking to revive old alliances and forge new partnerships. This renewed interest was marked by increased diplomatic visits, military cooperation agreements, and economic engagements. By 2024, Russia had concluded military cooperation agreements with 43 African countries and emerged as a major arms supplier to the continent. A notable development was the deployment of Russian military instructors to Equatorial Guinea in November 2024, aiming to protect the presidency and train elite guards, reflecting Moscow's growing influence in West Africa. Additionally, Russia's involvement in Africa has extended to economic ventures, particularly in the mining and energy sectors. However, its trade volume with Africa remains modest compared to other global powers. Over the past decade, trade between Russia and African countries has seen both growth and challenges, shaped by economic trends, global geopolitics, and strategic efforts to strengthen bilateral ties. In the early 2010s, Russia's engagement with Africa was modest, but by 2013, a shift in strategy aimed at reviving historical ties led to a marked increase in trade volume. Between 2013 and 2018, trade between Russia and African countries more than doubled, signaling Russia's renewed interest in becoming a prominent economic partner on the continent. This period saw Russia exporting military equipment, grains, and energy resources, while African countries supplied Russia with agricultural products, minerals, and textiles. Egypt emerged as a particularly significant partner, with Russian exports to Egypt alone reaching about $3.3 billion by 2022. Morocco also became a major destination for Russian exports, importing nearly $2.3 billion worth of goods in the same year. These developments underscored the potential of a stronger Russia-Africa economic relationship. In 2019, during the first Russia-Africa summit, President Vladimir Putin set an ambitious goal to double trade volume with African nations, aspiring to reach $40 billion within 5 years. This was part of a broader initiative to establish Russia as an alternative economic and strategic partner for Africa. Yet the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and later, the conflict in Ukraine, affected Russia's trade dynamics worldwide, including with Africa. By 2022, despite increased efforts, the trade volume between Russia and Africa stood at around $18 billion, a promising figure but still far from the $40 billion target. Even so, trade turnover surged again in 2023, rising nearly 35% in the first half of the year, as reported by President Putin. This uptick suggested renewed momentum, likely aided by diplomatic efforts and expanded agreements in military and economic cooperation. Let's take a quick pause. If you've enjoyed the video so far, could we ask a small favor? Continue with the history of the China-Africa relationship over the years. The relationship between China and Africa has evolved significantly from the early 20th century to the present, transitioning from limited interactions to a comprehensive partnership encompassing political, economic, and cultural dimensions. Early 20th century, limited engagement. In the early 1900s, interactions between China and Africa were minimal, primarily involving small-scale trade and the presence of Chinese laborers in African territories under European colonial rule. These engagements were sporadic and lacked formal diplomatic relations. Mid-20th century anti-colonial solidarity and diplomatic foundations. The mid-20th century marked a pivotal shift as both China and African nations pursued liberation from colonial powers. China extended support to African liberation movements, providing moral and material assistance. A significant milestone was the establishment of diplomatic relations with Egypt in 1956, marking China's first official diplomatic engagement with an African country. In the 1960s, China actively supported various African liberation movements, offering military training and resources. For instance, China provided training to rebels in Guinea-Bissau and supported the Frelimo movement in Mozambique. Late 20th century economic cooperation and infrastructure development. Following the Cultural Revolution, China's focus shifted towards economic modernization. In Africa, this translated into significant infrastructure projects, notably the construction of the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, TAZARA, between 1970 and 1975, which facilitated regional trade and connectivity. By 1979, China had established official relations with 44 African countries, significantly enhancing its foreign relations environment. Early 21st century strategic partnerships and economic expansion. The 21st century has witnessed a deepening of Sino-African relations, characterized by substantial trade growth and strategic partnerships. The establishment of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, in 2000 institutionalized high-level dialogues and cooperation frameworks. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, launched in 2013, further solidified its commitment to African development through investments in infrastructure, energy, and telecommunications. By 2021, China had become Africa's largest trading partner, with trade volumes reaching $254 billion. Recent developments, diversification, and challenges. In recent years, China's engagement in Africa has diversified beyond trade and infrastructure to include healthcare, education, and technology sectors. However, challenges have emerged, including concerns over debt sustainability and the environmental impact of certain projects. In 2024, discussions at the FOCAC summit addressed these issues, emphasizing sustainable development and mutual benefit. Overall, the China-Africa relationship has transformed from limited early interactions to a multifaceted partnership, significantly influencing Africa's development trajectory and China's global economic strategy. South Africa's accession. In 2010, South Africa joined BRICS, marking the group's first expansion and introducing an African perspective to its deliberations. This inclusion aimed to enhance cooperation between BRICS nations and the African continent, focusing on economic development, infrastructure investment, and political collaboration. South Africa's participation has facilitated dialogues on issues pertinent to Africa, such as sustainable development and regional security. The 15th BRICS Summit in August 2023 extended invitations to Ethiopia and Egypt, among others, to join the bloc. Their full membership took effect on January 1, 2024, further amplifying Africa's representation within BRICS. Ethiopia, with its rapidly growing economy and strategic location in the Horn of Africa, brings valuable insights into regional stability and development challenges. Egypt, as a leading economy in North Africa and the Arab world, contributes its experience in trade, energy, and cultural diplomacy. Ministerial Conference in Russia. During the first ministerial conference of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, held in Sochi on November 9th and 10th, 2024, Russia reaffirmed its commitment to strengthening ties with African nations. Building upon the second Russia-Africa Summit in July 2023, where President Vladimir Putin announced the cancellation of $23 billion in African debt, the recent conference emphasized the implementation of socio-economic projects in Africa. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov highlighted the importance of utilizing the debt write-offs to fund development initiatives directly within African countries. This approach aims to enhance infrastructure, healthcare, education, and other critical sectors, thereby fostering sustainable development across the continent. The conference also addressed the establishment of a permanent top-level Russia-Africa dialogue mechanism. This initiative seeks to coordinate efforts against terrorism and extremism, address environmental, food, and information security issues, and participate jointly in African Union programs on developing the architecture of peace, stability, and security. Conclusion. The support provided by BRICS nations, particularly Russia and China, is contributing to a shift in the global balance of power. The emerging global order is no longer solely shaped by Western influence. Instead, countries are advancing through fair collaboration rather than coercion or ideological imposition. Africa, with this renewed support, has the potential to become a global leader in growth, prosperity, and humanitarian values, moving beyond the painful legacy of colonization and the hardships of its past. The future holds the promise of a thriving Africa that embodies resilience, opportunity, and a new vision for sustainable development. That's all for this video.
Our next story is about Africa and Russia. President Vladimir Putin is making another play for the continent. He just held a summit in the resort town of Sochi. Russia invited ministers and business leaders from several African nations. They held talks with their Russian counterparts and worked on new deals. Moscow is calling the summit a major win. They say it has dashed Western plans to isolate Russia, and Putin is not done yet. He plans to deepen the relationship with Africa. He has promised to provide total support to Russia's friends in the continent. Here's our report.
Russia is courting Africa. A summit took place over the weekend, the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum. It was held in the Russian city of Sochi. It's a resort town on the Black Sea. That is where Russia laid out the red carpet for ministers and business delegations from Africa. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, was in charge of the summit, and yesterday he conveyed President Vladimir Putin's words to his audience.
I would like to reiterate that our country will continue to provide total support to our African friends in different sectors, ensuring sustainable development, the struggle against terrorism and extremism, combating epidemics, food problems, and the consequences of natural disasters.
Putin has promised that he will continue to provide total support to Russia's friends in Africa. And Russia does have a lot of friends there. Let's look at the Sahel states first: Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. These three nations saw military coups recently. They are now ruled by military juntas. The juntas have shunned their traditional partnership with their former colonial overlord, France. Instead, they have all turned to Russia for support.
And today, Africans and Burkinabes are rediscovering Russia as a world power, as a partner we can work with.
From now on, we're not going to take our instructions from Paris, Washington, or anywhere else. We want respectful partnerships, sincere partnerships, win-win partnerships.
Respect and a win-win partnership. That is what the Sahel states want, and that is why they have turned to Russia. Moscow has soldiers in these countries, mercenaries who are helping them fight against religious extremists. France, the US, and other Western nations had partnered with the Sahel states before the coups. But the juntas believed that the West wasn't doing enough, which is why they turned to Russia. And there's an additional advantage. Moscow isn't the type to lecture any government, whereas the West is known for its sermons. So it's clear who the Sahel juntas prefer. And it isn't just them.
Yeah, Russia, it's a good country for us. Besides that, President Putin, he understands the Africans. He is pro-us, pro-Africans. So this is why I personally align with the Russians.
Lesotho, Nigeria, Ethiopia, multiple Central African states. All of them sent their delegations to Sochi. They are all keen to work with Russia. This is a diplomatic win for Vladimir Putin. Ever since the war in Ukraine began, the West has been trying to isolate Russia, but it clearly hasn't succeeded. This weekend's event was the second high-profile summit hosted by Russia in a month. Putin held the BRICS summit in late October in the city of Kazan. And now we have this Russia-Africa Partnership Forum in Sochi. Both events catered to the global south. They were a way for Russia to try and reshape the current world order and pitch for a multipolar world instead of one dominated by the West. And by the looks of it, Moscow is well on its way to doing that.
There are 149 countries around the world who are a member of China's Belt and Road Initiative, but Kazakhstan might be the most important partner for the future of China's growth. Kazakhstan shares a 1,700-kilometer border with Xinjiang, an autonomous territory in northwest China that was an important part of the ancient Silk Road. In 2013, China revitalized this old trading route with the launch of China's signature Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, it was during a visit to Kazakhstan in 2013 when China's president, Xi Jinping, formally announced China's new mission of building the world's largest trading route that has now gone on to fundamentally change how our world conducts international trade. Over the past 11 years, China has poured over $6 trillion into investments around the globe, and Kazakhstan has been one of China's closest partners.
В целом, отношения дружбы и сотрудничества с Китаем являются для нас безусловным приоритетом. Сегодня во время своего выступления я привел конкретные примеры, связанные с нашим сотрудничеством, ростом торговли, ростом инвестиций Китая в нашу экономику. Все это, конечно же, имеет очень большое значение.
Fast forward to today, and China's presence can be seen throughout the country. In Almaty, Kazakhstan's wealthiest city, new car dealerships for Chinese electric vehicle brands are seen throughout the city. BYD is one of 15 Chinese car brands now available in the country, as many Kazakh locals are taking advantage of China's position as the world leader of EV cars. In fact, 7 of the top 10 best-selling cars in Kazakhstan are Chinese, with Chinese auto brands doubling their share of the Kazakhstan market last year. On the Chinese-Kazakh border, the two countries work together to build the Korgos Gateway, the world's biggest port used exclusively for handling cargo containers carried by trains. And on Kazakhstan's western border, along the Caspian Sea, China built a $29 million container hub in the port city of Octal. You see, this is what China does better than any country in the world. They see the long-term potential before anyone else and make key investments that help transform the future of that country. Let's take, for example, the Khorgos Gateway. It's the world's biggest dry port, but many experts thought it was a huge risk for China to invest in this project. Why? Because the project is located over 1,600 miles from the nearest ocean. Why would China want to invest so much money and time into a project so far removed from the ocean and cargo ships? To be honest, not many countries would be willing to take a gamble and build such an ambitious project, but China saw the long-term potential. And fast forward to today, and the project is a huge success for both China and Kazakhstan. The port is used exclusively for handling cargo containers carried by trains and sends goods from China to Europe in half the time it takes for sea cargo. Earlier this summer, Xi Jinping visited Kazakhstan and announced the two countries had agreed to double their bilateral trade as soon as possible by cultivating growth and cooperation in areas such as important minerals. And this is where the long-term play of China's cooperation with Kazakhstan comes into full effect.
您最想念中国的什么？
我在中国待了差不多8年，所以想念好多东西，想念中国菜，想念中国的文化，想念中国的人民。
In 3 decades as an independent country, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan has built an economy that is rich on the export of its natural resources. In 2018, the Kazakh government restructured its mining industry in an effort to welcome more foreign investors. Kazakhstan has always had tremendous potential for mining, but the industry was bogged down by bureaucracy, a lack of transparency, and corruption. All of this changed in 2018 when the Kazakh government decided to start over and follow the investment-friendly regulations of Australia, a mining superpower, as a model for their own industry. Since the reforms, there has been a huge increase in foreign governments and companies wanting to enter the Kazakhstan mining space. In 2024, the number of exploration licenses in Kazakhstan is on pace to nearly double the average annual amount issued over the previous 6 years. For China, gaining access to these crucial minerals and resources is a vital part of China's long-term play to boost its own economy. By now, it's no secret that China is the world leader in electric vehicle production, and it's many of these key minerals sourced from Kazakhstan that help China build the world's best EV batteries. In fact, when we break down the resources needed to produce a single EV battery, about 29 kilograms of nickel, which makes up roughly 15% of the battery, is needed. Kazakhstan is rich in nickel and in a prime position to meet the growing demands of a booming EV industry. Just look at this chart from Trading Economics, which shows the amount of nickel exportation from Kazakhstan the past 5 years. Exports are exploding, increasing several hundred% in the past 24 months alone. Nickel is a growing sector for the Kazakhstan mining industry, but the biggest and most powerful mineral being mined from Kazakhstan is uranium, the key mineral used in nuclear power production. In fact, Kazakhstan has been an important source of uranium for more than 50 years and became the world's largest uranium producer in 2009. Fast forward to today, and Kazakhstan now produces 43% of the world's uranium. And once again, this is where we see a natural fit for China and its future ambitions. Earlier this summer, Bloomberg reported that China is making a massive push towards nuclear power, and the uranium being extracted from Kazakhstan is one of the key reasons how China is able to make this move. China now has more nuclear reactors under construction than any other nation in the world and approved 10 new reactors in each of the last 2 years. China is now expected to surpass both France and the United States to be the world's leading atomic power generator by 2030, according to estimates from Bloomberg. What's even more incredible is a report released by ITIF, the United States' leading think tank for science and technology. They produced a research paper asking a simple question: how innovative is China in nuclear power? The answer is found right at the beginning of this report. Analysts assess that China likely stands 10 to 15 years ahead of the United States in its ability to deploy fourth-generation nuclear reactors at scale. It's hard to argue this statement when you see how fast and how far Chinese technology in the industry is going. Earlier this year, New Scientist reported that China successfully designed a nuclear reactor that passively cools itself in an emergency, showing to the world it is possible to build nuclear plants without the risk of dangerous meltdowns. Now one can understand why China's government chose Kazakhstan as the location when Xi Jinping announced the official start of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013. China knew exactly the road it wanted to take for the future of its country, and that road led right through Kazakhstan, its neighbor and key trading partner for many years. And this is quite an interesting observation to make regarding the government in Kazakhstan. Remember earlier in the video when I mentioned the Kazakh mining industry was full of bureaucracy, a lack of transparency, and corruption? Reforms passed in 2018 revolutionized the mining sector, bringing stability to the industry and allowing a stable point that more foreign investments could pour into Kazakhstan. And these same political changes are now being made throughout the entire country and affecting everyday society. Just look at the Kazakh president who stated all funds that accrue to the state as a result of corruption trials should be spent on building schools. That's quite an amazing development. And this is what happens when a country prioritizes economic growth and greater prosperity for its citizens. To be honest, this is one of China's greatest accomplishments over the past 40 years, building the critical infrastructure needed to lift an entire new generation from poverty into the middle class. Over the past 20 years, we've seen China build world-class metro systems, the world's most extensive high-speed rail network, in addition to building the most extensive highway system. In fact, China's highway rail network is over 184,000 kilometers in length and longer than the US, EU, and India combined. Kazakhstan is simply following in the same footprints as China. Just look at this new report from the World Bank entitled How New Roads in Kazakhstan Create Jobs, Save Lives, and Boost Trade. Inside this article, it tells the story of how Kazakhstan has always enjoyed an excellent geographical position as it can serve as an economic bridge between China, Europe, and the Middle East. But Kazakhstan's potential has historically been underutilized due to poor connectivity. But once again, partnering with China, the Belt and Road Initiative, along with these government reforms, have changed all of this for the better. The ancient Silk Road has been revitalized, and Kazakhstan is now fulfilling its destiny that eluded the country for so many decades, and being that trading bridge between China, the Middle East, and Europe. As the government continues to prioritize the mining industry, and of course, double down its efforts with the economic cooperation with China, the current government is now taking the opportunity to build a better future for its society by investing in the next generation of Kazakhstan. At the beginning of this year, the government started directing profits from the Sovereign Wealth Fund directly to children under the age of 18, with nearly 6.9 million Kazakh children receiving funds to help them with future school tuition and housing payments. As we come to the conclusion of today's video, I want to leave you with one final message, as I know many people are skeptical of China's ambitions around the world. I enjoy making these deep dive videos into China's Belt and Road Initiative because the future of our world involves learning to work together and finding ways to economically prosper. China has been the factory of the world for decades, but over the past 10 years has shifted into becoming the world leader in advanced manufacturing. This is why China dominates so many industries, including solar, wind, and EV batteries. It has risen to this position through strategic partnerships, much like this one with Kazakhstan, that has been a win-win partnership for both nations. In the future, we need a world where all countries work together. Another great example of this can be seen with the Kazakh government's commitment to following in the footsteps of China and becoming a carbon-neutral country in the future.
Мною поставлена задача достичь углеродной нейтральности к 2060 году. Работать в данном направлении нужно очень прагматично. Население и экономика нашей огромной страны растут, а для качественного роста нужна энергия. С постепенным закатом угольной эпохи уже к 2030 году в Казахстане наступит дефицит электроэнергии. Мировой опыт подсказывает наиболее оптимальный выход – это мирный атом.
In February 2023, the Kazakh government adopted the strategy for achieving carbon neutrality by 2060 and will partner with countries around the world for technological support to achieve this target. With China's position as the world leader in renewable energy and Kazakhstan's partnership in the BRI, China will be a natural partner to help Kazakhstan reach its carbon neutral goals and create a better planet for all of us. Now, if you're interested in learning more about China's Belt
of a mass resignation wave hitting the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, have sent shockwaves through Israeli society and military circles. Over 40% of IDF troops, including a significant portion of its critical reservist ranks, are reportedly refusing to show up for duty in Lebanon and Gaza. This alarming trend was confirmed by a prominent Israeli newspaper, which described the situation as a military alarm that is reverberating across the country. The reasons for this unprecedented crisis are multifaceted, involving issues ranging from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, to burnout, casualties, and broader societal divisions. At the start of the current conflict, the IDF experienced a historic mobilization. Nearly 300,000 reservists were called up, with turnout rates exceeding 100%. In some units, participation surged to an astonishing 150%, as volunteers flocked to bolster the ranks, even without formal orders. However, this initial surge of solidarity has dwindled significantly. Recent data indicates that turnout rates in active combat units in Lebanon and Gaza have plummeted to as low as 29%, with an upper estimate of just 40%. This sharp decline is emblematic of deeper systemic and emotional challenges facing the IDF. Burnout among reservists has reached critical levels. Many of these soldiers have been engaged in combat for over a year, separated from their families, missing career opportunities, and putting their academic pursuits on hold. Senior IDF officers have expressed growing concern that the protracted nature of the conflict is eroding morale, particularly among reservists who are integral to the military's operational effectiveness. The IDF has responded by proposing measures to extend mandatory service times and expand its ranks, but these solutions have faced logistical and political hurdles. For instance, the IDF has identified a need for 10,000 new soldiers, yet recruitment efforts have fallen short, particularly among the ultra-Orthodox community. Casualties have further exacerbated the situation. Fighting in southern Lebanon has proven to be one of the deadliest campaigns for the IDF in recent history. Elite units of the Lebanese resistance forces have inflicted heavy losses on Israeli troops, disrupting ground operations and dealing psychological blows to the army. In one particularly deadly clash, 6 soldiers were reported killed as the IDF pushed deeper into southern Lebanon. While the official toll is troubling, skepticism about the accuracy of these figures persists, as the IDF has been accused of underreporting casualties to maintain an image of strength. This could shed light on why IDF Army Chief Herzi Halevi, in a now viral clip, appeared visibly startled by a remark made by Israel Katz. Just days earlier, Katz had boldly claimed that the Lebanese resistance group had been defeated on the battlefield and would soon be disarmed. The statement, however, seemed at odds with Israel's official war objectives in Lebanon, as disarming the resistance has not been explicitly included among its stated aims. Katz's assertion left observers questioning whether it was a calculated remark or simply a slip of the tongue, further highlighting the confusion and potential lack of cohesion within Israeli leadership. Halevi's reaction during the exchange spoke volumes, as he noticeably did a double-take when Katz mentioned disarming Hezbollah. His sideways glance at the defense minister as he spoke suggested unease, perhaps reflecting the IDF's understanding of the challenges involved in confronting the well-equipped and deeply entrenched resistance group. The moment has since sparked speculation about the disconnect between political rhetoric and military realities, with analysts questioning whether such bold statements serve to boost morale or mask the complex and unresolved nature of the conflict.
We will not make any ceasefires, and we will not stop and will not take our foot off the pedal, and we will not allow any arrangement. That does not include achieving the goals of the war, which is disarming Hezbollah, withdrawing it from beyond the Litani River, and mainly creating the true conditions for the residents of the north to return to their homes safely.
This skepticism stems from a pattern of inconsistent reporting during past conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon. Independent sources suggest that actual casualty numbers may be significantly higher, which could be contributing to the erosion of trust within the ranks and among the Israeli public. The inability to secure and hold frontline positions in Lebanon has further demoralized troops, with many questionings the strategic objectives of the campaign. Another factor contributing to the crisis is the contentious role of the ultra-Orthodox community in Israeli military service. Decades of political and judicial efforts to draft young men from this community have failed to achieve a stable resolution. Many ultra-Orthodox Jews view military service as incompatible with their religious values and way of life, fearing that enlistment would lead to secularization. This has created a deep divide in Israeli society, with secular Israelis feeling unfairly burdened by military obligations. The issue has become even more polarizing in the wake of the October 7 attacks and the subsequent war, which has claimed the lives of over 780 soldiers. Compounding the problem is the perception among some ultra-Orthodox groups that the IDF's actions in Gaza and Lebanon conflict with the moral tenets of Judaism. This sentiment has led to resistance against military service, further straining the IDF's ability to fill its ranks. Last year, 63,000 ultra-Orthodox men were listed as eligible for service, but widespread exemptions have rendered these numbers largely theoretical. This disconnect underscores the broader societal divisions that are undermining Israel's ability to present a unified front in times of crisis. The current crisis is unprecedented in the history of Israel's military. The IDF, long considered a symbol of national unity and strength, is grappling with internal fractures that threaten its operational capacity. With burnout, PTSD, and societal divisions taking their toll, the Army's leadership faces an uphill battle to restore morale and rebuild trust. The situation also raises broader questions about the sustainability of Israel's military strategy, particularly in protracted conflicts that test the limits of human endurance and national cohesion. As the IDF navigates these challenges, the implications for Israel's security and political stability are profound. The mass resignation crisis is not merely a military issue. It is a reflection of deeper societal tensions and the toll of perpetual conflict. Whether the army can adapt and recover will depend on its ability to address these underlying issues and chart a course that balances military needs with the well-being of its soldiers. Meanwhile, despite the heavy IDF losses, the conflict has taken a dramatic turn as the group launched a series of bold and high-impact strikes against key Israeli military sites, demonstrating a significant escalation in its capabilities. On Wednesday, the group claimed responsibility for hitting the Hakiria base in Tel Aviv, a strategic hub housing Israel's Ministry of Defense, the IDF General Staff, and critical Air Force operations. Using Qadr-2 ballistic missiles, the Lebanese resistance declared the attack a resounding success, asserting that the missiles had struck their targets with precision. The Qadr-2, described as a state-of-the-art ballistic missile, has become a symbol of the resistance's growing technological prowess. Capable of traveling up to 225 kilometers, 139 miles, the missile carries a formidable 140-kilogram warhead and is designed for high-accuracy strikes. This marked the second strike on Hakiria within 24 hours, following an earlier drone assault that added to the mounting pressure on one of Israel's most heavily fortified sites. The Lebanese resistance's strategy was not limited to Hakiria. The group expanded its operations to target additional sites in Tel Aviv and beyond. In the video released shortly after the attacks, the Lebanese resistance showcased the Fadia 6, a long-range tactical missile with enhanced precision, underscoring its evolving arsenal. The missile was employed in strikes against the Tel Nof airbase, located southeast of Tel Aviv. Known as one of Israel's oldest and most vital Air Force installations, Tel Nof is home to F-15 fighter jets, drones, and units specializing in electronic warfare. The successful targeting of such a high-value location sent a strong signal about the group's ability to penetrate deep into Israeli airspace and deliver targeted blows to critical infrastructure. Wednesday's operations also included a missile barrage on the IWI Military Weapons Industries Company in Ramat HaSharon, a key supplier of weaponry to the IDF. This was the first time the Lebanese resistance had targeted the site, which is located 110 kilometers, 68 miles, from Lebanon's border. Additionally, the Glilat base, the headquarters of the IDF's Military Intelligence Unit 8200, came under missile fire. This unit is considered the nerve center of Israel's signals intelligence and cyber operations, making it a strategic target in the group's campaign to disrupt Israeli military operations. Further north, the group launched an aerial attack using a squadron of drones against the Amos base near Afula, which serves as a key logistical hub for the Israeli military. The assault was part of a broader campaign that also included strikes on illegal settlements in Avivim, Manara, and Katzrin. The Lebanese resistance declared these operations as acts of solidarity with the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and a defense of Lebanon against Israeli aggression. The scale and precision of these attacks reflect a significant shift in the conflict's dynamics. The Lebanese resistance's use of advanced missiles and drones highlights its ability to adapt and respond to Israel's military superiority. By striking high-value targets deep within Israeli territory, the group has demonstrated its capacity to challenge the IDF on multiple fronts, complicating Israel's ability to maintain dominance in the region. These developments come amid growing concerns about the IDF's ability to sustain its operations. The recent mass resignation crisis, coupled with declining morale and increasing casualties, has left Israel's military stretched thin. The Lebanese resistance's attacks not only exacerbate these challenges, but also signal a new phase in the conflict, where advanced weaponry and psychological tactics are being used to undermine Israeli military and political cohesion. As the situation escalates, the region faces an uncertain and increasingly volatile future.
Benjamin Netanyahu's psychopathy and mass terror are not only attracting people who want to take him down from outside of Israel, we have more and more people inside of Israel trying to take his life. Now we had this video coming from Israel of flash bombs being launched at Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Caesarea. This was published just a couple of hours ago.
News.
And the police is yet to make any arrests when it comes to the people who are in charge of launching these light bombs or flash bombs on Benjamin Netanyahu's house. This is a step up, a very dangerous step up, and this is considered to be an assassination attempt against Benjamin Netanyahu from someone within Israel. But before we talk about the details of the attack and who might be behind this attack, it's important to clarify that Benjamin Netanyahu faces regular protests for years against him from within Israel. Some of the most significant protests we had against him were from Israelis who were criticizing his war in Gaza. And at one point, we had Israelis flying in paragliders next to his house to resemble the 7th of October attacks earlier in 2024. Now we have this. Before that, we had assassination attempts coming from Hezbollah against Benjamin Netanyahu with a drone that reached his bedroom. We heard explosions reports next to his house yesterday, indicating that there are more assassination attempts against him. Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't been moving unless authorized by the head of his security. He is not conducting meetings with his government and cabinet members in any locations that are known to the public. They constantly move from one place to the other. But now people are directly attacking him from within Israel, and no arrests have been made yet. Who are these people? Well, firstly, it's important to clarify that Benjamin Netanyahu's house is one of the most secure and places that are under surveillance in Israel. It's constantly monitored. You have security teams around the clock, cameras around the clock, very high-level security measures. So no one can just go and throw light bombs, right, or flash bombs on Benjamin Netanyahu's house like that. So if someone does that, he should be immediately arrested and known, because there's surveillance. This indicates that that someone might have committed this from within the establishment in Israel. And there are very many reasons from people within the establishment, either the security establishment, someone who has power, someone is tied to powerful figures, or from within the army or the security establishment in Israel, to do that. Why? Because Benjamin Netanyahu has feuds almost with everyone. He sacked the defense minister. He has problems with the IDF chief of staff. He spies on figures within the military and security establishment. The levels of distrust are unprecedented in Israel. And we spoke about the reports a couple of days ago that Benjamin Netanyahu has direct teams within the Israeli army that report to him directly and leak information without due diligence and without following the chain of command when it comes to Israel. Meaning, well, he doesn't trust many people, and there are many people who don't like him, let alone the fact that the majority of the Israeli public view him as the person who is responsible for sending Israelis to die for no reason in these wars. And he is the person leading to the deaths of the kidnapped Israelis in Gaza due to the lack of an agreement being reached, primarily by Benjamin Netanyahu. Most of the people surrounding Benjamin Netanyahu in power already agreed to a ceasefire. That's back from the beginning of 2024, after the temporary ceasefire ended within a couple of months. Then we had the Palestinian side agreeing to a ceasefire, Joe Biden declaring that they agreed to reach a ceasefire, and more kidnapped Israelis were still alive in Gaza. So many Israelis are saying that, no, it's Benjamin Netanyahu killing them. He is responsible because he hasn't reached a deal, and he is only proceeding with his wars for his own sake, not for the sake of the Israeli population. We have violence being taken against the families of the kidnapped Israelis in Gaza, physical violence, verbal violence, sisters and brothers of those who are kidnapped. There is a lot of hate towards them, saying that they are serving the Palestinian side simply because they criticize the way things are being run by the Netanyahu government. All of these things show that there is a massive resistance from within Israel to Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, not only by the civilian population, but also by people in power. And this attack on Benjamin Netanyahu's house is a very dangerous escalation. We had responses coming from Israel and many sides condemning what is happening, including people in the opposition. But the most interesting comments came from one of Netanyahu's closest aides in the government, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice, Yariv Levin. Yariv Levin is a man who is considered to be one of the masterminds behind the judicial reform attempts in Israel, the judicial reforms that had many Israelis protesting all throughout the year in 2023 in the streets in record numbers. He took advantage of this attack and he started to promote the judicial reform again. He said there was no need for the lighting bombs to be fired tonight at Prime Minister Netanyahu's house to understand the seriousness of the rampant violence and the refusal of those who are trying to dismantle the country from within. I reject outright the assertion by the police and the Shin Bet, criticizing the enforcement bodies and the Shin Bet, that this is a serious incident. This is not just another serious incident. It is a link in a chain of violent and anarchistic actions, the purpose of which is to lead to the murder of the prime minister and overthrow the elected government through a violent coup. The chain of these actions is being carried out for about 2 years now under the auspices of the selective enforcement of the law enforcement authorities. Again, criticism for the authorities. This criminal conduct was, of course, also approved by the High Court of Justice. He's blaming the courts, which rejected the petition submitted by Minister Wasserloff in this regard. Since the formation of the government, I have been fighting to fundamentally change things, to change the composition of the Supreme Court, to fix the system of legal advice to the government, and to put an end to the selective enforcement. He means having full control by the government on the judicial system, meaning that the government will control and dictate everything that happens in Israel from a legal perspective, to, in effect, turning Israel into officially a total dictatorship. He continued, the time has come for all members of the coalition, all the factions, all the members of the Knesset to announce as one man about the unequivocal support for the moves that I led and stopped, and for the move necessary to change the situation. The time has come for full support to be given to restore the justice system and the law enforcement systems, and to put an end to the anarchy, the defiance, and the attempts to harm the prime minister. There were also other criticisms coming from Netanyahu's closest allies, saying that this is a massive escalation and we need to stop it before we reach a case of murder, a case of assassination against the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. We are facing a very serious situation, and Benjamin Netanyahu's life is definitely at risk. In recent weeks, we have been speaking about the reports coming from Israel about networks from within Israel working for Iran and countries that have hostilities with Israel, knowingly indicating that many Israelis and Israeli Jews from all walks of life, male, female, age groups, different age groups, have more faith in Israel's biggest enemies than they have with or in Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. And again, not many of these things are being published enough to the relevant level when it comes to mainstream media. What's the message that we're getting here? The message that we're getting here is that not only is, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu committing massacres and a mass genocide against the Palestinian people and the Lebanese, and behaving in a psychopathic terrorist way against so many nations and acting recklessly, is making Israel a bigger threat to the world, to global security, to populations all across the world. But this is also a massive indication of the complicity and deliberate ignorance, or deliberately putting aside the facts when it comes to Israel by the people who are allied with Israel and support Israel, primarily the United States administration and some of the European establishments still supporting Israel. We have a case where there is a genocidal regime committing mass war crimes against the Palestinian people and against the Lebanese and against other people in the region, wreaking havoc, massive instability. And these powers that are still supporting him are ignoring all of those things and ignoring the fact that there is a high level of disapproval from within. Now, ever since the beginning of the war, I personally said that there is a perfect recipe to conduct a regime change, enforce a regime change from outside within Israel. Why? Because you have a regime that is flawed from its core, a neo-fascist regime based on apartheid, supremacy, ethnic cleansing, massacres, committing war crimes, mass terror, a genuine risk not only to the people they oppress, but also to their own population, especially those who oppress them. There is disapproval from the establishment to a high level against Benjamin Netanyahu, and there is disapproval from the people. All of these are perfect recipes. And usually the United States and its allies, they will conduct military coups for things that are way smaller than that when it comes to countries that they don't like. However, to them, Israel is different. But now is the time to have a reflection and change way when it comes to this country even before an assassination happens. Because if an assassination happens, you could potentially lose control over how things are. But now is the perfect time to take the initiative, change the course, and take down the supremacist regime in Israel and replace it with a democratic and equal government. What are these people waiting for? If this continues down the same path, Benjamin Netanyahu will most likely be assassinated. If Benjamin Netanyahu is assassinated, many of his cult followers would wage an all-out war, not to hand the power to their opposition. And you could be facing a situation where someone even more reckless and extreme than Netanyahu himself, taking power in a country that is already reckless and committing mass terror and mass war crimes, as confirmed by the International Court for Justice. Therefore, it would lead to even a bigger threat when it comes to its own population, the populations of the region, and the global population as well.
Kofi, follow me.